Everything begins with the protagonist waking up next to a campfire, surrounded by women, and wondering if there was some celebration going on. Soon he discovers that it was a camping party and is amazed, mentioning that he could not miss such an opportunity. As he smells the aroma of roasted lamb, he begins to salivate, and upon noticing that it was an entire lamb, he is fascinated. Admiring the fire, the protagonist comments that the food was delicious and splendid, so he decides to approach, but ends up falling face first on the ground when he realizes he was tied up. Thoughtful, he wonders if those were ropes and tries to understand what was happening. Suddenly, a system window appears saying, "Main mission, survive. Objective, survive the pursuit of the primitive people for 12 hours. Reward, Attribute Bridge X, Survival Pack X. Countdown, 1 minute and 20 seconds. Suddenly, two big cavemen approach him. Thoughtful and somewhat indignant, he realizes there were only men and wonders where the women from before were. The protagonist tries to talk to them, explaining that there was a misunderstanding and asking where they were. However, the two men start to laugh and prepare to grab him. Desperate, the protagonist finally remembers how he ended up in that place and comments that he really got himself into a big mess. 12 hours earlier, in an unknown location, the protagonist was crawling towards the sea. As he approaches, he scoops some water with his hands, washes his face, and comments that the previous day he was accompanying Sister Jang while she bought her favorite accessory, and wonders how he ended up there after just a nap. Thoughtful, he wonders if being in the company of a rich woman could be a punishment, although it was never a crime. However, he hears a noise, and upon spotting a group of strangely dressed people, wonders if they were doing cosplay. Then the protagonist asks how he could get out of there, but the youngest in the group speaks in an unknown language, and holding a spear, throws it towards the protagonist, almost hitting his face. Scared, he starts to run, and realizing that he was being chased, the protagonist screams that it was too real to be a reality show. Seeing that he was leaving the group behind, he taunts them to eat dust, as he used to be a runner, and normal people could not catch up with him, much less those who were carrying things. However, another spear passes close to hitting his abdomen, making the protagonist reflect and realize that they were really trying to kill him. Suddenly, a system window appears saying, "Main mission activated. Survive." Confused, the protagonist does not understand what that main mission means. He keeps running, when another system window appears saying, "Main mission, survive the pursuit of the primitive people for 12 hours. Reward, Attribute Point X1, Survival Pack X1. Countdown, 11 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. The protagonist wonders if that was a system and if he had transmigrated. However, one of the men aims his spear and throws it in his direction. Desperate, the protagonist tries to dodge, but the spear hits him directly in the neck, making him slowly lose consciousness while lamenting. In the present, the protagonist was tied up while a system window appears saying that he had survived the 12-hour pursuit of the primitive people. Main mission completed. Survive. He acquired the survival pack and attribute point +1. Please distribute your attribute point. The protagonist feels relief upon realizing that he survived. Observing the system window, he wonders what the mission reward would be. He had acquired a survival pack and one more attribute point, which now needed to be distributed. In another system window, it appears saying, User, Chen Li, Physique +1, Strength +1, Speed +1, Prestige 0, Technology 0, Terrain none. The protagonist thinks that the pluses must mean that they can be enhanced, and it seemed to be a system seen in games. He wonders if he has transmigrated into some kind of world that simulates a game. The system asks if he would like to open the survival pack. Chen replies that he would like to open it. The system congratulates him, alerting that he has acquired expertise in all languages, novice rank. The system congratulates him, alerting that he has acquired the survival booklet, novice rank. The system alerts him that the map is active. All the places he visited will be pinned. He can name them freely. The system asks if he would like to take out the mountain-splitting axe. Reminder, all items removed from storage space cannot be put back. Jungle survival registered. Basic medicine registered. Suddenly, the protagonist begins to understand what the natives were saying around the campfire. A man wearing a skull on his head boasts of being the bravest and fiercest, capable of defeating the most powerful of beasts. A woman sitting near him is fascinated and comments that she would like to have a child with him. Chen thinks he is in a primitive world where civilization is yet to develop, and everything is in its initial stage. He assumes he was sent to a game where he needs to survive while helping to develop civilization. In short, it is a strategy and survival game. Thoughtful, he wonders if he might be something like a president or a god in this context. Reflecting on his situation, The protagonist decides to assign the attribute point to strength and decides to summon the mountain-splitting axe. Suddenly, the axe materializes in his hand, and strengthened by the point distributed in strength, he uses his new power to break the ropes that held him. He is surprised to find that just one point was enough to make him so strong. Suddenly, the cavemen notice that Chen has escaped and run towards him. The leader orders that they capture him without letting him escape and shouts to kill and eat him immediately. As they approach, he says the boy would not be able to escape. With a slight smile, the protagonist points his axe at them, calling them idiots. Speaking their language, he confronts them, questioning how they dare to disrespect a deity. The leader looks confused and asks what a deity is, as they did not know. The protagonist, realizing that only he spoke and deducing that he must be the leader of the group, Chen replies that he was sent from the heavens and that he is there to dominate them. He warns them that they should prepare to be punished for the affront. The leader becomes enraged and with a leap, lunges at him with his stick, and a system window appears saying, "The mission has been activated, he should hold firm." Objective: dissuade the primitive people, dominate them, and become the leader. Reward: attribute point X1, hemostatic solution X3. Penalty for failing: loss of the mountain-splitting axe. The protagonist realizes he cannot fail, as losing the axe would mean his end in this era. He then attacks the leader, confronting his axe with the adversary's stick, and the force of the impact causes the ground beneath them to crack. Chen reflects that he never imagined that the primitive people would possess so much strength. Both employ all their strength in the fight, but the protagonist's axe begins to crack the leader's stick. He realizes that the enhancement has strengthened his body. After demonstrating a great amount of strength, the two begin to shout, but the protagonist cuts the stick of his opponent, throwing a piece away. He looks back, where the other part of the stick was, while the leader does not believe his weapon was broken. Everyone there is amazed, looking at the piece of the weapon that broke. Chen looks forward seriously, with a bad feeling. Soon after, the leader, taken by fury, begins to shout, questioning how he dared to break his weapon, and orders everyone to advance, as they would attack together and should reduce him to pieces. The protagonist begins to run and warns the leader not to be a poor loser, since everyone had agreed to a one-on-one duel. He also mentions that many there seem to want to intimidate a 24-year-old, and questions if they consider that fair. However, one of the cavemen catches up to him and attacks from behind, but Chen manages to react in time, breaking the wooden stick with his axe, leaving his opponent trembling on the ground. The protagonist, facing them, curses and declares that it would end there. Pointing his axe, he warns them not to be hasty, as he would kill them before dying himself, and yells for them to back off. The cavemen hesitate for a moment. Chen realizes he is in trouble, as if they attacked all at once, he wouldn't be able to resist. He needed to think of a way to intimidate them. However, the group chasing him starts to tremble with fear and desperately flees. The protagonist, confused, wonders why they suddenly began to run away. While he reflects on whether he scared them, he questions if it was because he raised his voice a bit or because he is truly frightening. A huge wild beast approaches behind him unnoticed, but suddenly a system window appears informing, "A side mission activated, scare off the saber-toothed tiger." Objective: help the primitive people to scare away the fierce saber-toothed tiger. Reward: attribute points X2, primitive people's prestige. Mission started, acceptance is automatic, it cannot be rejected. The protagonist is confused to see the side mission involving the saber-toothed tiger in the system window and wonders what that is. Unbeknownst to him, the tiger begins to salivate over him, but he only notices when drops start to fall on his head. Looking up, he surprises the tiger, who is not expecting his reaction. However, quickly, Chen begins to run upon realizing that it was indeed a huge, real saber-toothed tiger. The tiger begins to chase him, and with its sharp claws, it tears everything in its path as the protagonist tries to flee into the jungle. Desperate, Chen thinks it's very unfair and wonders why everyone wants to devour him. The tiger leaps trying to capture him, but the protagonist manages to save himself by jumping over a ravine, and soon thinks that if it continues like this, he will end up being killed. Realizing that the tiger is still chasing him, Chen wonders what kind of side mission this was and how he could scare off the tiger, since a single bite could tear off half of his body. Suddenly, with a great leap, the tiger manages to scratch the protagonist's back, who falls to the ground. Quickly getting up, he thinks that really hurt, and that if he took another attack like that, he would die. He questions why he has so much bad luck, and realizes that he can no longer run away from the tiger. Evaluating the situation, he concludes that a frontal attack wouldn't work. He needs a plan. As he looks around, he wonders what he could use to deal with the saber-toothed tiger. Spotting a fire in the jungle, He realizes that beasts are afraid of fire. With the tiger approaching, Chen realizes he has only one chance. He charges towards the beast, shouting that he will face it from there on. With a roar, the tiger also charges. The protagonist, almost being hit, starts to slide to pass under the beast and comments that it wouldn't be able to hit him as he slid at the right time. However, his plan fails and the tiger stumbles over him. Desperate, the protagonist runs off and thinks he will never again believe what he sees in movies, while the tiger, even more enraged, chases after him. As he flees, Chen realizes that this is part of the behavior of felines who love to play with their prey. In the jungle, he thinks that the vegetation will help him buy time and that victory will be his as soon as he reaches the fire. With its sharp claws, the tiger tries to hit the protagonist again, but he manages to dodge the beast's attacks and quickly spots the fire. As the tiger destroys all obstacles with powerful attacks, the protagonist jumps and rolls, reaching close to the fire. He quickly grabs one of the burning logs and hits the tiger's eye, which growls but does not back down. The protagonist realizes he was right. The fire put the tiger on alert. Facing the beast, he challenges it and asks if it wasn't fun chasing him, hoping that this would make it back off. However, Chen hears a terrifying sound and wonders if it could be from a monster even bigger than the saber-toothed tiger. After hearing the noise, all the birds around fly away in fear, and the tiger, hearing the sound and becoming terrified, flees. The protagonist is confused to see the tiger running away and yells at it not to flee and wonders how the mission would turn out if it fled, but a system window appears saying that the side mission was accepted, scare off the saber-toothed tiger. The system congratulates him saying that the saber-toothed tiger fled and he completed the mission, scare off the saber-toothed tiger. He earned attribute points X2 and the prestige of the primitive people. He should distribute the points. Realizing that a huge beast was approaching, he comments that he needed to flee from there, as his survival was a priority. While fleeing, he decides to add 1 point to strength and another to agility. Determined, he starts to run and notices that thanks to the point added in agility, he could move easily among the jungle obstacles. Suddenly, the protagonist discovers the primitive people hiding, and upon seeing him, the leader is surprised and questions why he wasn't devoured by the saber-toothed tiger. With a slight smile, Chen lifts his axe and comments that for him, a saber-toothed tiger is nothing more than a kitten, and that the animal fled desperately after being easily defeated by him. The protagonist believes that now he will be worshipped by them, but realizes that they are not impressed by his action and wonders if they did not understand what happened. Suddenly, a blonde woman approaches him slowly, causing confusion. When she gets close, he questions her about what she was doing. She clings to his leg and exclaims that he saved them. Then, the other people start to affirm that he saved them, asking him to accept their gratitude and to assume the leadership of the people, so that they would no longer be afraid of the saber-toothed tiger. He ponders and wonders if this was the prestige of the primitive people given as a reward by the system. Surprised by the great impact of his actions, he asks them to stand up, commenting that it is difficult to refuse the request given so much excitement. Excited, they begin to proclaim that besides staying with them, he would also be their leader. Another mentions Chen's strength, saying he was so moved that he almost cried. Chen then imagines himself as a king. He orders them to rise, as from now on, he would be the king of that people. A system window appears saying that he was successful in integrating with the unnamed tribe. Mission completed, hold firm. Obtained hemostatic solution 3 times, attribute point 1 time. He had to distribute his points. The protagonist decides to apply it to physique, thinking that any improvement in attributes would strengthen him, and apparently, he would need to carry out missions to acquire more attributes, so he decides to open his inventory. A system window then appears that says, hemostatic solution, a solution created by combining various medicines, aids in bleeding and promotes muscle growth with a validity of 1 day. Chen is disappointed to realize that the product has an expiration date, and worse, lasts only 1 day, and if he took it out, he would have only 1 day to use it. After picking an item from his inventory, he decides to use one to test the effect on the wounds on his back. Upon applying the product to the injuries, they heal instantly, leaving the tribe amazed. The protagonist mentions that it was quite useful and could save his life in risky situations, and asks Annabelle if anyone else was injured to offer the cure. Annabelle exclaims that the king was incredibly strong, and the people thank Chen, who questions if he wouldn't be able to protect them if he weren't strong enough. He states that as a king, he needed to know them better. Pointing to Annabelle, he asks for his name and his abilities. He responds that his name was Shirgu, the former leader before his arrival, known as the best fighter. Another introduces himself as Gun, standing out as an excellent hunter. A warrior named Lang Gu Chui introduces himself next, saying he had a voice so powerful that he could scare off wild animals. A muscular individual introduces himself as Huang Shi, the one with the greatest physical strength in the group. Suddenly, a hand lands on the muscular man's shoulder, asking if he had finished his introduction. Then, a woman interrupts, saying it was her turn to introduce herself. She begins by praising the king, calling him honorable and kind, and identifies herself as Shan Ling Ju Da, suggesting they call her Da Da. She was skilled in throwing rocks due to her excellent aim. The protagonist is impressed by her build and comments that she seemed more like a secret boss from some game. Next, a woman holding a fruit introduces herself as Shou Shou, saying she is an expert at climbing trees to pick fruits. Chen, relieved to meet someone he considered normal, expresses that it was a pleasure to meet her. However, he is suddenly hit by something. The protagonist wonders who would have hit him with a water bag. A tall woman apologizes, introducing herself as Ah Yu and commenting that the king was amazing. She also introduces her two children, mentioning that she has not yet named them. Chen is delighted to see that there were children there and recognizes the potential of these people. Suddenly, the young man who nearly hit him with an arrow earlier yells, calling him, startling the protagonist. The young man identifies himself as Zhun Lija, and although he has nothing special, mentions that he has sharp ears and offers help in escorting. The protagonist thinks it over and comments that someone distinctive finally appeared, referring to Zhun Lija as an excellent scout who would be of great use. He then decides to introduce himself, stating his name and suggesting they could call him King, Boss, or Brother Chen. He explains that he is a civilized person who arrived there to transmit knowledge to them. The tribe's people show confusion about what terms like Brother Chen, civilization, or transmit knowledge mean. The protagonist then assures them that what he will teach will make them progress significantly, promising that if they stay with him, he will ensure they eat meat every day. Excited by the prospect of eating meat daily, the tribe members start to celebrate. Suddenly, a system window appears saying that Ding was assimilated the host's desire. Main mission activated home. Mission content: help in the construction of the home of the primitive people, form and establish a true tribe, and expand the number of people to 50. Mission duration: 15 days. Since the mission was activated early, an additional 3 days were granted, changing the duration to 18 days. Mission reward: attribute points times 3, large resource box times 1, rigid inheritance times 1. The protagonist realizes this is a main mission, and observing the people notes that, along with the children, there were only 15 people at the location. If he wants to expand the tribe to 50 members in 18 days, he would have to assimilate other tribes. He would need to do everything in his power to complete the mission within this period. Analyzing the new rewards, such as the large resource box and rigid inheritance, he hopes these rewards will be valuable. Later that night, while everyone was sleeping, the rumbling of the protagonist's stomach woke him up. He mentioned that hunger prevented his sleep, and observing a woman licking a bone, concluded that there was nothing available for him to eat. Additionally, he noted the bravery of the tribe members, as there were no guards while they slept. Chen, desperate to need to eat something soon, suddenly remembered the meat left near the fire after the encounter with the tiger. However, two figures emerged in his subconscious, one in the form of an angel, warning that the monster that had scared away the saber-toothed tiger might still be nearby, and another in the form of a devil, insisting that he could not remain idle and die of hunger, suggesting that he should take a risk and fight if necessary. Chen gives himself light pats on the face and comments that it was a waste of time to worry, as he did not believe he would encounter the monster. Summoning his axe, he heads towards the piece of meat. Walking under the moonlight, he finally arrives at the location. Hidden behind the bushes, he notices the silence and remembers that he still needed to be cautious. However, as he approaches the fire, he realizes that there were more spoils from someone else, and as a king now, he could not just think about himself. After collecting the spoils, he decides to return and share them with the tribe's people. As he was heading back, he felt that the atmosphere of the place had changed, and suddenly, he falls into a hole, wondering how it appeared there. Confused, he observes his shadow cast in the hole and questions how the moonlight could penetrate such a dense forest. However, he realizes that it was not just a hole, and observing the destruction around, he wonders what kind of creature could leave such a large footprint. Comparing it with that of the saber-toothed tiger, he concludes that this one is much larger. He speculates about what monster would have such footprints and reflects that, having encountered the saber-toothed tiger, he should have realized that this place was not just a barbaric era, but a time when the most fearsome and lethal creatures in history inhabited. Walking back to his people, he thinks he cannot waste time and needs to find a safe place as soon as possible. Later, after sunrise, while the tribe's people were fighting over the piece of meat, the protagonist, shocked by this behavior, shouts for them to stop stealing from each other. Chen reflects that the wretches don't even know how to make fire, are unaware of concepts of economy and modesty, and have much to learn. The protagonist declares that today's food will be reserved for the hunters who will go out, and asks who will accompany him. Annabelle explains that they normally hunt in turns. Yesterday were Agun, Huang Shi, and he. Today it would be Lu Teng, He Ju Jiao, and Long Guqi's turn. Impressed, he suggests that if the king goes, everyone else would also go, and everyone gets excited about the idea. Quickly, the protagonist notices that Xun Li is disheartened and remembers that it was him who captured him yesterday, possibly fearing retaliation. He thinks about how to motivate him. Chen then says that those who want to accompany him can do so, as he wishes to find a safe place to establish the new home. Da, curious, asks what this home would be. He explains that home is the place where you build and live with your people, like the roots of trees. A home offers safety both for current and future family members. Dada understands this, and enchanted with the king, hugs him tightly and asks if she could stay by his side. The protagonist explains that they will all be part of a big family in the future, so they will all stay together. She, excited, begins to shout saying that the king wanted to stay with her and was willing to have a child with her. Chen, confused, asks her to stop talking nonsense. Annabelle asks where they will build the home. The protagonist asks everyone to come closer and pay much attention. Drawing on the ground, he explains that they need to find an open land with mountains to the north and a river to the south. That way, they would have access to drinking water, irrigation, firewood, and rocky materials, as well as establishing a relatively safe zone, reducing the risks of attacks. This would facilitate both hunting and harvesting. According to him, they would find seeds and wood easily, using the materials for agriculture and building houses. Thoughtful, he wonders if it would be better to be near the sea, leaving the tribe's people confused without understanding the explanation. The delta could offer fertile soil and a favorable environment for learning maritime navigation in the future. Xun Li interrupts him and mentions that he knows the place the king is looking for. Chen, surprised, asks if he is telling the truth and asks Xun Li to take him there, because if such a place really exists, it would be of great help to them. Xun Li explains that this place is to the east and not very far from there, but advises that the king should not go there because there is a herd of strong-tempered cows. The protagonist, imagining the cows as those of the future, asks if they were afraid of mere cows and comments that if they had cows, they could obtain nutritious meat, as well as other domestic products and animal traction. Decided, he states that the herd of cows would be their prey that day. Then, he shouts for everyone to grab their weapons, as they would head east to create the new home. Walking eastward, they notice that the environment is normal. Hidden behind the bushes with a chicken hat, Xun Li comments that the area is safe and that they could soon advance. Chen says they don't need to be so cautious, as they cannot afford to waste time since it would soon be nightfall. He reminds everyone that there's no reason to worry, as he had scared off the saber-toothed tiger, and, should the tiger return, he would protect them. Xun Li agrees with the king and informs that they would see the area of the cow herd upon reaching the top of the mountain. Walking up to the top, Chen, confidently, asks Xun Li to guide them there. Peering out, Xun Li asks everyone to crouch down because the herd was there. The protagonist questions the excessive caution and, looking for himself, asks if there are other monsters besides the cows. However, he is enchanted by the place and wonders if the odor is from the sea, asking the system to open the map. Upon examining the location, he realizes that they are indeed near the sea and that it would be an excellent place to build the first home. However, Xun Li pulls him, making the system window disappear, and the protagonist is confused, trying to understand what was happening. Xun Li asks the king to stay quiet to not alert the herd of cows. Observing the herd, Chen comments that he would be careful. A system window appears saying, Survival Manual, Active Search, Scanning Result, Plants X3, Animals X2, Green sunflower herb can be used to relieve stomach pain. Dragon vine, its sap has a mild toxin that can cause numbness and paralysis. Great Tsubaki, a deciduous tree, produces high-quality wood for hundreds of years. Gray squirrel, a mammal that feeds on nuts, has delicious meat. Pincer wasps, their sting contains a neurotoxin. More than 5 stings can be fatal. The protagonist was confused because he couldn't locate the herd, so he asked where they were. Shunli explained that they were in that small forest near the river bend and offered to take them there to check. Chen agrees and decides to check the herd personally. Half an hour later, the group rushes toward the small forest, and upon arriving and hiding among the bushes, Shunli warns that they could not get too close, or they would be noticed. The protagonist notices that the environment is very quiet and wonders why Shunli was so cautious, since it was just a herd of cows and they did not pose a great danger. Observing around, he notices other things, and a system window appears saying, Updated plants X3, small animal X1, updated map. The protagonist is frustrated and wonders if that was all. Hidden among the bushes, he mentions fearing the presence of terrifying monsters in the area, but finds it strange not to see even a small calf, questioning if the hunters might have been mistaken. Chen questions if Shunli could have mistaken the place, but Shunli begins to tremble and points to something. Quickly, the protagonist notices something strange, seeing a huge shadow and wondering why a large tree would be moving. In panic, Shunli screams for them to look up. Upon doing so, the protagonist despairs, trying to understand what that huge creature was, unable to believe that such a huge beast could be a cow, and a system window appears saying, Black iron-horned cow, mammal, order Artiodactyla, subfamily Bovini, mostly herbivorous and extremely territorial. He wonders if this really was a cow. Annabelle, with a trembling voice, questions the king about whether they were really going to hunt that. The protagonist, terrified, confirms that yes, they would hunt them, and with a serious look, advises preparing an ambush while he goes to check the situation alone. After his departure, the other hunters comment that the king was awesome. Chen, distressed by the situation, thinks he does not want the tribe's people to die, and observing the black cows, concludes that he only has to trust in his speed ability. He thinks her arm was thicker than his own body and decides it would be better to first test with a calf. While looking for another, he is startled by the terrifying sound a cow makes and opts to continue searching. Upon finding one that is eating, he hesitates upon noticing its size and considers it would be unfair to interrupt someone in the middle of a meal. Finally, he finds a smaller cow playing with a butterfly and decides to approach calmly, thinking it would be safer if it had a gentle temperament. As he emerges from the bush, he tries a gentle approach and asks if the grass was tasty, noting that it was still eating. However, the smaller cow quickly becomes serious, and Chen, awkwardly, thinks she would not suddenly attack him. Suddenly, she starts to bellow, attracting the attention of the entire herd. Enraged, the other cows advance towards him. The protagonist protests, saying he only asked a question and that they didn't need to go crazy. Desperate, he begins to run and decides to enter the water, believing it would make them stop chasing him. Looking back, he notices that not even the water discouraged them and comments that he did nothing wrong. The tribe's hunters, watching the situation, are impressed by the king's audacity, commenting that only he would have the courage to provoke the entire herd. One of the hunters notes that he is approaching a cliff and a dead end, while another questions what he means, as the king must be planning to take down all the cows at once. While fleeing, the protagonist screams for help, and with extreme agility, begins to jump and climb the cliff. However, the cliff begins to tremble, and he looks down, questioning what was happening. Looking down, he realizes that the cows were colliding against the cliff, and seeing one of them unconscious, wonders if they couldn't stop in time and ended up crashing into the rock wall. At the top of the cliff, he began to yell to get their attention, commenting that it would be great if they were all eliminated, but a group of cows stopped near the cliff, staring at him intently. The protagonist realized that they wouldn't be able to climb such a steep wall, and commented that they wouldn't be able to reach him. Noticing that they were retreating, he understood that he was safe there. Watching the situation, he tells them to wait for him. As soon as he teaches his tribe to hunt and make weapons, he would teach them a lesson. Later, he realizes he wouldn't be able to descend now since the mad cows were waiting for him below, and the only option was to climb, keep climbing, and memorize the location. Reaching the top of the cliff, something catches his attention, and as he contemplates the landscape, he is amazed, realizing that this was the perfect place. He decides then to found not just a village, but an empire. This was just the beginning of his journey. Later, the tribe's members wonder about the actions of the cows and question if anyone saw where the king went. At the top of the tree, Junli looks for the protagonist, while Annabelle expresses hope that he hadn't been crushed or split in half. Coming down from the tree, Annabelle mentions that he will look for the powerful axe to retrieve it. As soon as he touches the ground, something is launched in his direction. A powerful axe nearly hits him, leaving him terrified as a shadow approaches and comments that he talks too much. The protagonist then confronts him, asking if he didn't think he would return intact. Annabelle is surprised by the king's presence. Shun-Li is relieved, and Annabelle, sheepishly, asks if he is okay and if the herd was really fierce. Pointing to a cow, the protagonist mentions that he thought of eating more meat to strengthen his forces and asks if they would accompany him. Shun-Li, worried, responds that he doesn't know how to fight, while Annabelle, smiling, comments that they could still bite them, although that wouldn't help much in defeating them, and asks the king to show the way. With an intimidating look, the protagonist questions them if it wasn't clear, demanding a simple yes or no answer, to which all the hunters shout yes. Retrieving his axe that was stuck in a tree, he points out and comments that he will teach them how to create powerful weapons worthy of them, an effective method for a successful hunt, with which they will defeat those black cows in 3 days. Later, above the forest, the protagonist used his powerful axe to cut down trees, while the tribe's people admired the king's power. Annabelle asks the king that it wasn't possible to eat that large tree, noting that it also had no fruit, and asks what he was planning. With the axe on the tree trunk, the protagonist explains that this was material to create weapons and asks everyone to watch and learn from the process, as it will be useful in the future. Holding a piece of wood, he instructs them to make a wooden pole about 2 meters long. Using his axe, he starts to sharpen the tip and asks them to do the same. After finishing the spear, a system window appears saying, "Successful creation of a new weapon. Technology points +1. Current attributes, Physique 2, Strength 3, Speed 2, Prestige 0, Technology 1, Territory none." Holding the spear, the protagonist comments that it was much better than the attribute points received as a reward for completing the missions. The only problem was that he didn't know what the technology points were for. About to throw the spear, he explains that this is a pointed weapon that should be used to stab or throw, and then throws the spear towards a tree, hitting it squarely. One of the hunters praises the throw as excellent, and another is impressed. Annabelle, enchanted as he approaches the spear, comments that the piece of wood was really powerful. The tribe's people, also enchanted, ask him to teach them how to create a weapon like that. Annabelle hugs him and comments that before he just collected these pieces of wood, but didn't know he could create something on his own. The protagonist asks everyone to calm down, as he was there to help them. Then he decides to give the spear as a gift to Annabelle, who thanks him for the generosity in receiving it. Chen then shouts for them to create their own spears, as they would begin special training. Shun-Li promptly responds to his wish. Later, in the middle of the forest, Annabelle and Huang participate in a training combat with the new spears. Ah-Gun observes that the wood was wide, thick, and hard, while the protagonist explains to the other hunters that the two would face him. Initially, they hesitate, but soon Lang Gu and another hunter attack the protagonist. Lang Gu tries to hit the protagonist with a powerful blow, but Chen easily dodges and notes that the attack caused great damage to the ground. The second hunter tries to hit him next, but the protagonist counterattacks, striking him directly on the chin. Lang Gu, with a jump, attacks again, but the protagonist points his spear and yells at him to die, leaving everyone stunned by the outcome of the duel. The protagonist then touches Lang Gu with the spear, declaring that he was dead. Lang Gu is surprised by the king's power. Chen reminds him that he used to be one of his enemies. Falling to the ground trembling, Lang Gu admits that the king is a god and obviously knew how to fight. Holding the spear, the protagonist explains that they didn't know how to use wooden weapons, only relied on their brute strength to attack. The advantage of this weapon was in its tip, which should always be directed at the enemy or prey. He concludes by saying that they needed to practice more, so that the spear became more compatible with their abilities. After drawing a circle on a rock, the protagonist asks the hunters if they are seeing it. He then asks everyone to keep a distance and try to hit the circle right in the middle, promising that the first person to succeed will receive another wooden spear. Annabelle, excited, declares he will be the first and prepares to throw the spear. With great strength, he throws it, and although it pierces the stone, it misses the target. The protagonist praises the throw, but observes that he just needs to improve his aim and announces that the next one will be Shun-Li. Suddenly, a spear almost hits him. Chen comments that it was a close call that almost crippled him, and Shun-Li, embarrassed, apologizes. The protagonist then begins calling the next ones as they continue to miss the target. Watching the hunters, he thinks that apparently they have no talent for this and that he will need to teach them step by step. However, a spear hits the target squarely, shocking the protagonist and all the other hunters. Chen is surprised that they hit exactly in the center, while Ah-Gun shouts asking if this made him the winner. The protagonist congratulates Ah-Gun, hands him a new spear, and encourages him to keep it up. Dada, who was up in a tree, notices something and yells warning that there was trouble. because a wild animal was approaching through the forest. Quickly, the protagonist shouts for them to grab their spears and prepare for combat. As he realizes the animal is approaching, Chen yells for them to stay alert and thinks of using this opportunity for them to gain experience. A huge beast emerges, destroying the trees in its path, and begins to roar. The protagonist yells for them to pay attention, and when the beast charges at them, he yells to keep focus and prepare for the fight. Wielding his spear, he yells confidently that they would win. The beast, growling towards the protagonist, tries to hit him, but he dodges and yells for them to surround the beast without attacking. Pointing his spear, he instructs them to wait for the signal. However, the beast charges at him. With a swift movement, the protagonist pierces the beast with a powerful blow between the eyes and yells to weaken the enemy. Realizing that his attack was not enough to defeat the beast, he yells to start the attack. He then orders Agun and Langu to throw their spears at the beast's vital points, and both promptly comply, hitting the target accurately. The beast becomes even more enraged, and with a powerful attack, breaks the protagonist's spear, leaving him surprised. It remains standing while the hunters surround it, but with a precise throw, Agun hits the beast's eye with his spear, causing it to scream in pain. The protagonist, seeing this throw, thinks that Agun continues to surprise him. The beast then begins to lose control, and Chen yells for Shirgu and the other hunters to attack. Together, they throw their spears, hitting the beast, which growls fiercely. Trying to escape, the beast moves, but the protagonist intercepts its path and comments that it wouldn't be so easy to run away. At that moment, he summons his powerful axe and with an accurate strike, cuts off the beast's leg. He yells for Xun Li, who is in the tree, to quickly jump on the beast, hitting hard, but the beast does not die and begins to emit a sinister aura. At that moment, a system window appears, announcing a new situation. Danger. The beast has gone mad. The protagonist yells that the beast was out of control and that they should back off. Meanwhile, Xun Li, with his spear embedded in the beast's body, questions why it won't die. However, the protagonist advances on it, leaving the other hunters worried, who scream for him to be careful. With an impressive leap, he attacks the beast with his axe, causing a large explosion. The other hunters, uncertain of the outcome, are concerned for the king and start calling him. When the smoke clears, one of the hunters yells for them to look on top of the giant beast's head, startling another hunter who asks him to stop shouting, fearing it might be the ghost of the king. Atop the dead beast's head, the protagonist affirms that he is alive and well, and with a slight smile comments that their cooperation resulted in the defeat of the beast. He then announces that that night they would feast on a delicious wild boar. The hunters are excited, but Xun Li still holds his spear even with the wild boar down, relieved that they have food for today. The protagonist extends his hand and asks him to get up, praising him for his excellent work. Speechless and moved, Xun Li thanks the king. Regarding the wild boar, the protagonist calls Agun, who promptly responds, asking what the king wishes. Chen mentions that it was Agun who dealt the main blow, and announces that from today, Agun will accompany him on future hunts, and that he will create new weapons for him. Agun begins to celebrate among the other hunters, initially causing some discomfort. However, the other hunters begin to celebrate and shout cheers for the king, with one of them commenting that he was sent from the heavens. Another hunter highlights that the protagonist split the wild boar's head with just one blow of his axe. Annabelle comments that the king killed the beast with ease without needing his help, and seeing Dada carrying a large piece of meat, asks where she was taking it, as he wanted a piece. She responds that she would not give it away, as she had cut it especially for the king. Approaching the protagonist, Dada mentions that the large piece of meat was for him. Chen is surprised and asks if they usually eat the meat that way, to which she confirms yes, and asks what the problem would be. The protagonist begins to remember that they knew how to make fire, and questions why they continued eating raw meat. She explains that the fire was made by accident, leaving the protagonist thoughtful about whether the fire had been just an accident. He reflects on how human civilization developed through fire, an element that transmits security and scares away wild creatures. Even a developed nation cannot remain independent without fire, and they were more backward than he imagined. If they knew how to use fire, they would understand that roasted meat is better and tastier than raw meat. The protagonist thinks that if he wants to help this primitive people, he first needs to teach them to produce fire. He calls them and mentions that he had an idea. Analyzing the tip of his old spear, he realizes it could work. Rubbing the spear tip on the trunk of a fallen tree, he comments that he will have to teach other hunting techniques on another day and summons the tribe to come closer and pay close attention. He explains that using a wooden stick, down or something similar, and a tree trunk, and with his hands, he begins to rub the stick patiently. As the stick pierces the trunk, a small flame of fire forms, leading the tribe's people to celebrate, saying that the king was a great god. The protagonist comments that this was so they would stop eating raw meat, and the tribe's people begin to call him the god of fire. Annabelle, excited, shouts wanting the whole world to know that his king was incredible. The protagonist grabs his head and comments that this was barbaric, and that he had already told him to stop making a fuss. As he watches the people making sure the fire does not go out, a system window appears saying, "New inventions, using wood to produce fire. Technology points +10. Current attributes, physique 2, strength 3, speed 2, prestige 0, technology 11, territory none." The protagonist is surprised to have received a reward of 10 points and comments that earning technology points was easier than he thought, but he still did not understand what technology points were for. Another system window appears saying, "Technology points are used to identify rigid inheritances. 10 technology points are needed for each identification." Suddenly, he remembers that this was the reward for completing the home mission and comments that this rigid inheritance thing seems to be quite complex. He needed technology points to identify them. When suddenly, someone calls him. So Shu Lia comments that he heard sounds of hungry wild boars while he was cutting the meat. The protagonist is confused. Shu Lia continues saying that he already suspected they would appear, and that is why he spent some time looking and finally found several wild boar piglets. Suddenly, a system window appears saying, "Secondary mission activated. Domesticate the beasts. Mission objective, raise wild boar piglets and turn them into domestic animals. Reward, small chest of materials ×1. Main recipes ×1. The system asks if he wanted to accept this mission. The protagonist thinks about the mission to domesticate the beasts, and, analyzing the number 1, he wonders if it could be part of a series of missions. He instructs Xun Li and Dada to go fetch the wild boar piglets, and both understand. He emphasizes that he wants all the piglets and that they should not leave any behind, warning them to be careful when catching them. At that moment, a system window appears, indicating that he has accepted the secondary mission of domesticating the beasts. Dada grabs Xun Li's arm and starts running, leaving him desperate, while shouting that he will take care of it properly and that he was already on his way back. The protagonist sighs lightly and comments that he'll need to build a stable before they return. Approaching Annabelle and another person, he calls them to come with him after the meal, as he will teach them something new. Later that day, as the sun sets, Annabelle and 2 other men carry logs of wood, and Annabelle questions why the king asked them to gather so many branches. Another man tells him to be quiet, as the protagonist always knows what he's doing. Agun is amazed at how quickly they gathered the logs. Annabelle asks what he was doing, and he responds that the king said that it was called straw rope, a material stronger than the vines they used, and this was amazing because the straw was much softer. He explains that it's just a matter of tying several knots to have a rope. Annabelle is confused and asks how to do this. The protagonist asks Annabelle to stop the drama and do something else. After planting a piece of wood in the ground, the protagonist creates a circle with several holes. The tribe's members ask the protagonist what he wants them to do, and he asks them to follow him. Holding a piece of wood, he instructs them to take the woods and straw ropes and do exactly as he is doing, and that each should make at least 5 of these. After placing the assembled wood in the hole he prepared, he asks them to secure the top part well with a braided straw rope. The assembled woods and adjusted with the rope form a cabin, and now only the final touch is missing. He instructs them to carefully spread the straw over the exterior after finishing. A system window then appears indicating a simple stable built. The protagonist comments that it seems the stable is good, and the tribe's people begin to celebrate the good job. Suddenly, the members of the tribe run past the protagonist at high speed, and after all entering the stable, they start arguing about who arrived first. A woman comments that this home created by the king was for her, where she would raise her children, while another mentions that her children are about to be born. Displeased, the protagonist comments that this stable was not for them, when suddenly Dada and Xiu Lie arrive bringing the piglets. The little one comments that they rescued all the piglets. Dada reports that there are 8 piglets in total, and that they are all safe. The protagonist praises them for the great job, and pointing to the stable, asks them to put the beautiful wild boar piglets inside. Desperate, a man jumps towards him, asking him not to do that. Embracing him, he questions how the protagonist would offer a cozy home to these wild boars. Huang hugs him from behind and comments that it was not easy to create such a cozy home where they could sleep, and that everyone wanted to live inside it. Another man comments that he also wanted a home where he could live with the king. The protagonist pushes the two away and yells for them to back off and keep their distance. He mentions that after building a more comfortable wooden dwelling, he will not allow them to enter, as if they insist on staying in the stable. It's fine by him. Huang questions if he will build a better home for them, expressing that he no longer wants to live there, although Lang still wants to. The man, in desperation, changes his mind and prefers that the boar piglets stay there. The protagonist thanks them for their understanding and asks the little one to take the piglets inside. Xunlai responds that he is already on his way. Agun questions if these wild boars were not meant for consumption and asks if they would be pets. The king suggests, wouldn't it be better if they could have enough meat by raising these boars, eliminating the need to hunt? Agun is excited by the proposal. The protagonist explains that by providing a good home for the boars, they will reproduce more, ensuring a prosperous life. While the little one watches the piglets with drooling mouth, he comments that even if they don't fully understand, they just need to follow him to the end. Suddenly, a system window appears saying, Beast Taming Mission Complete. Rewards, small chest of materials, main recipe. Current attributes, +1 tech points. Stamina, 2. Strength, 3. Agility, 2. Prestige, 0. Technology, 12. Territory, none. The protagonist decides to open the rewards. After the small chest opens, a system window appears saying that he obtained a bag of salt from the small chest of materials. He learned how to prepare roasted eggplants, sautéed peanuts, fried eggs, roasted lamb leg, and sautéed clams. The protagonist is astounded by the rewards of salt and recipes and wonders if being a cook is more important than technological development. Another system window appears saying, unlocking more recipes, he obtains more rewards. The protagonist realizes that he will need to pay more attention to acquiring all types of ingredients and seasonings in order to unlock more options. That night, as everyone slept around the fire, the protagonist thanks Xunli for being there, as he was injured in the morning and now needed to stand guard at night. Xunli explains that yesterday, Shigu almost killed the king because of a trap he set, and he thought it fair to accompany him this night. Chen hugs him and asks if he thinks he is taking revenge with this, as he is not the type to hold grudges against his own. The little one thanks him. The protagonist comments that he would like to ask a question before he forgets, asking if there are other clans nearby besides theirs. The little one confirms that there are, but they are not friendly and are quite different from them. The protagonist, surprised, begins to inquire about these clans and asks him to tell more about them, such as where they live and how many there are. The little one mentions that he knows 3 clans in the region, the Yelin clan, the Haiwan clan, and the Jushi clan. He apologizes for having said earlier that they lived close by, but in fact, they reside quite far away, requiring at least a day and a night to visit them. The protagonist then requests that he describe these 3 clans in detail, preferably separately, and with more information than usual. The little one begins by explaining that the Yelin clan is the closest, located to the east, through the forest, near the land of the Black Bulls. They have a population of about 30 to 40 people, do not like conflicts, but are excellent at traveling long distances. Their leader is a woman known for her strong and difficult personality. The Haiwan clan has between 30 and 40 inhabitants and lives to the south, on an island in the middle of the sea. Its members have an intimidating appearance and often engage in internal conflicts. The Jushi clan is the strongest of the 3, with the largest population. The little one mentions that he used to live in the mountains to the southeast, and that on some occasions, he came down the mountains with them, saying that the leader to whom they attribute supernatural powers. To demonstrate this, he defeated a saber-toothed tiger with his own hands, and the little one advises not to provoke them. The protagonist analyzes the clans and considers that the Yelin clan would be the most appropriate to form an alliance, as joining them and increasing the population could be beneficial. He plans to proceed cautiously and seek a way to negotiate a peaceful alliance. Suddenly, a shadow appears behind the protagonist, asking if he doesn't feel cold sleeping that way. Dada hugs him, and noticing that he is still awake, suggests that they do something exciting together that night. Chen is surprised by the invitation and refuses, and Dada, making a cute face, asks if she doesn't look like a kitten. Chen, embarrassed, responds that she looks more like a saber-toothed tiger, and then picks up the little one and starts running, saying that Xunli needed his help and that he would talk to her later. Dada is sad about the reaction. Later, at dawn, the protagonist and the little one were on a tree. Xunli notices something moving in the sands and mentions that they had arrived. The two watch attentively as a shadow chases something. Meanwhile, the protagonist assesses the situation as they hunt some birds, and one of them shouts that he will cut it into pieces, at which point a system window opens. Dodo bird. Bird, columbiformes, columbidae. Nature, docile. Meat quality poor, egg production high. Suddenly, a member of the Haiwan clan catches a dodo. The protagonist observes that after a long wait during the night, the members of the Haiwan clan have finally arrived. They start celebrating the capture of a dodo, but soon get involved in an argument, and a clan member wielding a bone sword demands that they hand over the dodo, or threatens to decapitate a fellow clan member, who bravely challenges him to back down. From the top of the tree, the protagonist comments that indeed they are quarrelsome but simple-minded, and wonders if there are about 30 of them. He ponders that if he could incorporate them into his group, not only would he increase his numbers, but he would also secure resources like the dodo birds. However, the little one points out that they don't even have half their number, and that in a fight, they wouldn't be able to win. The protagonist acknowledges that this is indeed a problem, but suggests that with stronger weapons, they could win. He thinks that before confronting the other clan, they need to eliminate the herd of black cows to use the new resources in the creation of more powerful weapons and equipment. The protagonist decides to return and mentions that there is much to be done. Later, at the tribe's camp, while some members transport wood, Annabelle, clearly shaken, notices something and shouts that the king has returned. He mentions that they looked for him everywhere for a while and thought that the king had abandoned them, bringing relief to everyone to see him there. Chen apologizes for causing concern, but emphasizes that there is still much work to be done. He tells Annabelle to continue training with the wooden spears. Disappointed with the order, he accepts. Chen adds that Agun will be in charge of teaching them to throw. With only one day available, he must try to prepare them as best as possible, understanding the importance of the task. Seeing them, the protagonist sighs, knowing that his time is limited. While he is deep in thought, someone calls out to him. It was the muscular woman, holding a leaf. She mentions that this leaf is the most comfortable for cleaning oneself after pooping. He agrees and asks her to gather the other women. He explains that he needs hands to help sharpen the wooden spears. He also asks her to collect some rocks, as he plans to teach them how to make stone axes. The muscular woman nods, confirms, and says she will bring the sisters right away. A while later, as the protagonist is making a spear, the muscular woman returns with another woman, carrying some stones, and asks him to check if the rocks are suitable. He replies that they are perfect, noting that the stones would work well as whetstones. The protagonist explains that they should first rub one piece of rock against another until a sharp edge or point is achieved, then tie it to a wooden stick using a straw cord, and with that a stone axe would be made. The women are amazed by him and remark that he is incredible and truly a god. Suddenly a system window appears stating, he invented a new skill, stone grinding, technology points +1, current stats, physique 2, strength 3, agility 2, prestige 0, technology 14, territory none. He is stunned, questioning why he only received 10 points for making fire and just 1 for creating wooden items. He sighs, not caring about the result, and asks the women to follow his instructions and show him the results later. Suddenly, the muscular woman calls out, saying she finished and asks him to take a look. He is impressed to see a double-bladed axe and comments that she is quite talented. She says she remembered that the king's divine axe looked like that, so she tried to replicate it. Another system window appears stating, conditions fulfilled. First, transition from the old Stone Age to the new Stone Age. Second, helped a tribe member reveal her talent. Hidden resource, talent discovery activated. He wonders what the hidden resource is. Looking at the muscular woman, he sees her talent, toolmaker. He realizes that the talent discovery feature can reveal someone's unique talent. He figures out that toolmaker is likely the muscular woman's talent. Embarrassed by his gaze, she asks why he is staring at her. The protagonist is at a loss for words, and then asks the other women to make a similar stone axe to that pattern. But first, they need to make as many wooden spears as possible. They understand the king's request. Later, someone counts the weapons in the camp. The muscular woman, holding a spear, shouts that the 30th one is ready. The protagonist praises her, saying she is amazing, noting that she made more than half of them. She asks if the new spears she made are better than the previous ones. After inspecting them, he confirms and says she is very talented at times like this. The protagonist notices something wrong with her hands. Taking them in his own, he remarks that it was a long day of sharpening rocks and making wooden spears, and she worked very hard. The muscular woman says it's nothing. Enchanted, she adds that as long as she can help the king, nothing else matters. Suddenly, the other women appear, showing their hands. Ah Yu mentions that her hands are also sore, and Shou Shou asks if he doesn't care about them too. Embarrassed, the protagonist says he does care about them and acknowledges that they worked hard as well. Ah Yu asks why he doesn't blow on her hands, which irritates the muscular woman. Suddenly, he runs off, saying the spears made today are enough. telling them to take a break and mentioning that he will go check on the men's training results. The women are left confused. As he walks away, he mutters about how that scared him, when suddenly he hears someone shout that they are ready and to let go. The protagonist is startled to see a massive log coming toward him. He ducks at the last second and shouts, questioning what the hell was happening. Seeing the tied log, he wonders if it was a moving target, and comments that they were taking the training very seriously. Agun, looking at the spears embedded in the logs, announces that the winning team was Huang and Lang, and asks to reset the wooden target, as the next team should get ready. Agun is surprised to see the king. The protagonist asks how the training is going. Agun responds that everyone made great progress today, and mentions that they can already hit moving targets. Suddenly, the protagonist can see Agun's talent, master of throwing. Agun continues, saying that although Yeju has great strength, he struggles with timing his throws and only unleashes his full potential when paired with Annabelle. As for Tarzan, he doesn't speak much but is one of the most dedicated practitioners and was the first to master the technique. What surprised him the most were Huang and Lang Gu. Separately, they are nothing special, but together, they can throw 4 wooden spears in a short time. And the most incredible thing is that they all hit the target, scoring the highest points. The protagonist remarks that this is excellent, and with this, they can handle the black cows tomorrow. Agun asks if he is sure, and the protagonist confirms, but adds that, just to be safe, they should bring the secret weapon as well. Nagun gets excited about the idea of the secret weapon. Later that night, as some birds fly overhead, the protagonist, who is cutting something with an axe, sighs and comments that after working all night, he is finally finished. He recalls when he talked about the secret weapon. Holding some leaves, he instructed the hunters to collect as many as possible, mentioning that if anyone had cuts on their hands, they should avoid touching them. In the present, he notes that the system identified the black leaves as a natural paralytic drug, and that with some luck, their extract could paralyze those monsters. Suddenly, someone calls out, announcing they have brought all the wooden spears. The muscular woman asks why he made that hole in the stone. He explains that it is a stone mortar, and that soon they would understand its use. Suddenly, a system window appears stating, Statistics. He successfully invented the stone mortar. Technology point +1. Physique, 2. Strength, 3. Agility, 2. Prestige, 0. Technology, 14. Territory, none. He asked the muscular woman to call all the women and use the stone pestle to crush the green herbs in the hole in the stone, and then apply the sap to the tips of the wooden spears. Ye Ju questions him, saying they also wanted to play with the pestles. The protagonist, looking at the hunters, tells them they should rest, as he will need everyone for tomorrow's battle. The hunters comment that the king is badass. The next day, as the sun rises, the protagonist is on top of a tree, eating a skewer. He remarks that, just as he imagined, grilled meat tastes much better with salt. Suddenly, the muscular woman, holding a spear, shouts that the king is ready. She throws the spear in his direction. Chen catches the spear and says it's time, instructing the ladies to stand guard and protect the children, and for the rest to grab their weapons and follow him to the mountain. The tribe gets excited. The protagonist, wielding his mighty axe, shouts that it's time to show the monster who is boss. Sometime later, on the mountain, the tribe watches the herd of black cows. Huang asks if the protagonist is going to act as bait alone, and questions if it isn't dangerous for him to do that alone. Annabelle says the king is powerful and wonders what danger he could face, urging everyone to keep their eyes forward. The small one tells everyone to get ready, as there is movement near the riverbank. Annabelle instructs the 2 women with him to deliver the spears on time, especially to Agun, emphasizing that they cannot leave him without a spear. He comments that the king is taking a big risk and that they cannot afford any mistakes there. 10 minutes earlier, in the forest near the herd, the protagonist was hiding among the bushes. He thinks that, based on his previous experience, it should be safe to escape straight to the stone mountain. Watching a cow drinking water, he continues to ponder that he needs to be cautious and decides to start by luring a small one first. He begins to leap from bush to bush, thinking it was best to be extra careful or his life could be in danger. Then he throws a stone at the cow, hitting it square on the head. He starts shouting, calling it horned and saying it couldn't catch him, and that they were all fools. Suddenly, a small group becomes enraged and charges at the protagonist. He realizes with some regret that there are 3 of them instead of 1 and admits that this is a bit dangerous. He then starts running toward the cliff, pursued by the black cows. As he emerges from the forest, he shouts for Shigui to aim at the first black bull. After dodging an attack from a black cow, The protagonist shouts for everyone to focus all their attacks on it. Annabelle, standing on the cliff, shouts for everyone to prepare their spears and orders them to throw on his command. Suddenly, he gives the command, and all the hunters throw their spears, striking one of the cows. Even with its body full of spears, it tries to catch the protagonist, who, using his agility, manages to jump onto the cliff. Ah-gun, positioned on the cliff, prepares his spear, and as he throws it, he shouts for it to die already. The spear hits its neck, and it falls to the ground. The protagonist clings to the edge with one hand as the other cows start colliding with the cliff. Suddenly, the stone he is holding onto breaks, making him fall. However, a hand grabs him. Annabelle manages to catch him in time and starts pulling him up, asking if he is okay. The protagonist shouts for everyone to keep attacking, saying they have to kill them while they are still weak. The hunters keep throwing their spears as the cows stop in front of the cliff. Annabelle starts giving instructions on which ones to target. The muscular woman asks if the protagonist is all right. He responds that she doesn't need to worry about him, as he is fine, and asks her to keep helping Annabelle and the others. Looking at Shirgu, the protagonist can see his hidden talent. Talent, leader. He thinks it's no surprise since Shigu commands so well, and realizes it was worth making him the attack leader. Annabelle remarks that the cows are acting strangely. The cows start to stagger, and some have already collapsed. The protagonist comments that he didn't expect the tranquilizer to work so quickly, and wonders if they might not be able to go wild now. Suddenly, the small one spots some strange movement and reports that more black cows are advancing. A group of them starts crossing the river toward the cliff at high speed. The protagonist thinks they are coming faster than he imagined and probably got alerted by the noise. He tells everyone not to panic, saying everything is going according to plan, and they just need to focus on dealing with the three below, making sure they don't escape. One of the cows lets out a huge roar. The protagonist explains that the poison slows their movements and instructs them to aim the spears at the hind legs to prevent them from escaping. The cows, their bodies full of spears, begin to crawl, trying to get away. However, the hunters keep throwing spears, hitting their backs and causing them to fall near the forest. The protagonist calls for the attack to stop. Annabelle protests, saying now is not the time to be soft-hearted and that they need to kill them before the other group arrives. Chen asks how many spears they still have left. The muscular woman replies that they have 28 spears remaining. The protagonist asks the small one how many cows are in the herd that is on the way. He responds that there are about 20. The protagonist explains that's why he asked to stop the attack, because their number of spears was limited. Ah-gun questions that if they gave up now, all the effort to deal with the 3 cows would be wasted. He responds that, no, it's part of the plan, and explains that he never intended to face the entire herd with just a few of them. As the rest of the herd approaches with a massive shadow in the middle, the protagonist explains that from the beginning, his goal was to take down the herd's leader, and after defeating the leader, the remaining cows would simply scatter and flee. But for the plan to lure the leader to work, they needed bait, which is why he needed the 3 cows alive and couldn't let them escape. However, the original plan only involved using 1 cow as bait, but dealing with 2 extra ones had already used up a considerable number of spears. Suddenly, the small one shouts, alerting them that he can see the black cow's leader and that it looks like a giant monster. The herd leader starts to prepare and suddenly lets out a powerful roar toward them, making the cliff begin to tremble. Looking down the cliff, the small one warns everyone to be careful because they are coming. The black cows begin to collide with the cliff, causing it to shake. The hunters wonder why they are crashing into the cliff and ask if they've gone mad. The protagonist shouts not to stop the attack, explaining that the herd leader doesn't want to deal with them directly and is just giving orders to the herd from afar. Suddenly they hear a loud noise. Huang wonders what it is. Looking down, they realize part of the cliff is crumbling, and one of the hunters shouts that the stone wall is breaking. Desperate, the protagonist yells for everyone to retreat and find shelter. They start moving away from the cliff's edge, but the muscular woman is caught off guard by a crack and ends up falling off the cliff. Seeing her on the ground, the protagonist is worried, and along with the hunters, descends the cliff. While the hunters protect them, the protagonist picks her up in his arms and tells her not to worry, reassuring her that they will take care of her. The hunters form a circle to protect her from the black cows. One of the hunters asks his brother what they should do, whether to flee or fight. Huang, facing the cows, tells him not to be reckless and to wait for the king's order. Holding his axe, the protagonist realizes the cow's plan and instructs his people to be cautious and look out for one another. He admits to himself that the herd leader has already figured out his trap and didn't expect the leader to be so intelligent. Annabelle shouts for everyone to grab their weapons, saying they will go down to protect the king. but the protagonist quickly yells for them not to do that. They should stay up there and focus on attacking the first cows that approach. The group of hunters on the ground braces themselves as the herd charges at them. However, Tarzan quickly throws his spear, hitting one of them squarely. The protagonist seizes the moment and, with a single strike, slices its neck. As the cow writhes from the cut, Tarzan grabs him and retreats. Another cow charges at Huang, who throws his spear with incredible strength. However, the cow manages to block it with its hoof and rushes toward him. Huang manages to grab its horn. Meanwhile, his brother seizes the opportunity and throws a spear straight into its eye. Atop the cliff, Annabelle shouts for the other hunters to attack. As a result, several spears fly toward the cow, and before it realizes it, it's too late. The protagonist's group manages to defeat 2 of them while the rest of the herd stares at them. However, the herd hears a noise and begins to retreat. The protagonist is confused, thinking and wondering if they received an order to retreat, realizing that the leader has finally decided to join the battle. Suddenly, it starts to rain on the battlefield. The protagonist and Tarzan prepare to face the leader, who is walking toward them. Taking a deep breath, the leader gets ready to unleash a powerful attack. The protagonist realizes and shouts for everyone to get out of the way quickly. The herd leader then unleashes a powerful blast of energy. The protagonist and Tarzan manage to dodge it. The attack strikes the cliff, and the hunters on top are terrified at the destruction, realizing just how powerful the attack was. The protagonist questions what kind of attack this is, impressed by the display of power, and comments that it shattered everyone's morale with a single move. He says he'll draw the leader's attention and instructs the hunters to take the muscular woman and head north. The hunters understand the king's command. The protagonist dodges an attack from the leader and tells the hunters on the cliff to wait for his signal. Facing the leader, he declares he will be his opponent. However, the herd leader charges at him with incredible speed. The protagonist becomes anxious and uses his axe to block the attack. But the leader's strength is so immense that the ground around the protagonist cracks, and with a massive impact, Chen is thrown far away. The leader then prepares to advance with great speed, and with a leap, lunges at him. The protagonist gets up and starts running toward the cliff. Quickly, he notices a path carved out by the leader's previous attack and begins to climb the cliff while escaping. Unaware of the protagonist's plan, the herd leader, moving at high speed, crashes into the cliff, creating a massive explosion. The hunters on the ground worry about the king and are terrified upon seeing the herd leader, wondering what to do next. The leader begins walking toward the hunters on the ground, and one of them shouts for everyone to hold their ground and get ready for battle. Huang, holding his spear, declares that even if he dies, he will take out one of the monster's eyes. Suddenly, a powerful axe strike cuts off the herd leader's horn, leaving it confused about what just happened. The protagonist emerges from a hole in the cliff and says he has to thank the herd leader. Thanks to the crater the leader made, he was able to hide at a critical moment. With that, he summons his axe again, though he is seriously injured. The other hunters are relieved to see the king. The protagonist calls for Annabelle, who quickly responds. Chen tells him to be ready and awaits his command. He charges at the herd leader, and the other hunters take advantage and attack as well. Huang leaps onto the leader, but the monster manages to pierce his stomach with its horn. His brother, desperate, throws his spear at the leader, striking its leg. Huang, holding onto the horn, tries to bring it down. Tarzan seizes the opportunity and stabs the monster's hind leg, but the herd leader grabs him. Huang calls out to the protagonist while holding the horn. Chen jumps onto the monster's head and declares he's there. With a powerful kick, he strikes the herd leader, forcing it to release Tarzan. Huang takes the chance to escape. The monster, enraged, prepares and launches another attack, a devastating blast of energy. The protagonist and the other hunters manage to evade it, but it nearly hits the muscular woman. Using his agility, the protagonist leaps onto the monster and shouts for it to stop attacking. With a mighty axe blow, he strikes the herd leader, cutting into its shoulder. As the monster falls, he shouts for Annabelle and Agun to attack. Shigu yells for everyone to aim at the wound, and a rain of arrows descends upon the monster. The herd leader screams in pain and collapses, raising a massive cloud of dust. The hunters on the ground wonder if they've won. Annabelle and the others on the cliff begin celebrating their victory. The protagonist walks beside the monster as the other hunters remark how badass the king is. Looking at the herd, the protagonist senses something is wrong and questions what they are waiting for. Suddenly, under a flash of lightning, the herd leader starts to rise with a sinister look. The protagonist is frozen in fear and, looking back, realizes he's in serious trouble. The monster lands a full-force punch on him, sending him flying, then launches a powerful ground attack, causing the other hunters to be thrown back. Enraged, the monster begins unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. After being hurled against the cliff, badly injured, the protagonist realizes he was careless. He stares at the out-of-control monster, and suddenly, the herd leader pulls out one of the spears lodged in its body and throws it at the protagonist. Frozen in fear, he wonders if it's going to end this way, if he's really going to die there. Suddenly, the muscular woman leaps in front of the spear, taking the hit. The protagonist is in shock, seeing her on the ground, and starts to reflect on the moments they shared at the camp. He glares at the monster, furious, and curses it, questioning how it dares to hurt her. A mysterious energy starts to surge through his arm and into his axe, when suddenly, a system window pops up, warning him. System alert. Energy overload detected. Warning, warning. The protagonist declares that they're going to hell together. He unleashes a powerful attack that strikes the monster, cutting it in half. He then stares at the herd, demanding to know who's next. The herd, terrified, backs away as the protagonist, exhausted, shouts for them to die. Suddenly, one of the cows roars, causing them all to retreat. Chen drops his axe as a system window alerts him that his life is in danger. He starts vomiting blood and falls to his knees, losing consciousness as the system keeps warning him. He looks at the injured hunters, one of whom is crying over the muscular woman's body. Before passing out, he uses a hemostatic ointment. Sometime later, he starts to open his eyes and sees a strange silhouette above him. Yu is relieved to see that he's finally awake. He is confused to see her and asks if they are in the barn. She replies that they're not and explains that after the battle, they drove away the black cows, moved to a new place, and built this shelter just for him. She asks him to rest while she informs the others. He asks her to wait and tries to get up. She asks if he has any orders for her. Looking at the strange mark on his arm, he asks how the muscular woman and Tarzan are doing. She responds that when they found him, he was near death, but recovered quickly. After waking up, Tarzan has been outside protecting him ever since, and although the muscular woman's injuries were more severe, thanks to the king's divine medicine, she will be fine, and everyone else is okay too. He sighs, relieved to hear that everyone is all right. She says that everyone's injuries have improved over the past 4 days. He panics upon realizing he's been asleep for 4 days. She is confused by his reaction. Suddenly he opens a system window. Settlement. Objective: help build a home for the primitive people. Establish a tribe and expand the population to 50. Time remaining, 11 days. He thinks there's no time to rest. He needs to act now. Yu wonders why the king always seems to stare at nothing for some reason. As he tries to get up, he groans in pain. She insists that he needs to rest and that now isn't the time, but he interrupts her, saying it's fine, and asks her to call Annabelle immediately, telling him only that he has woken up and nothing more. He'll explain later. She understands and leaves the cabin. Tarzan, standing guard, is confused to see her leaving. The protagonist, thinking, realizes he is powerless after the battle, and this secret must not get out. It's not just about failing the mission. Looking at the map, he reflects that, luckily, after driving away the black cows, the tribe moved there right away, and they need to quickly build a fence around the area and later replace it with a wooden wall. The planting and livestock areas should be set up next. Suddenly, someone informs him that Annabelle is there and asks if he can listen from outside. Annabelle says it's great to see the king well. The protagonist tells him he has a very important task for him. Annabelle understands. Chen asks him to come closer and listen carefully. After Annabelle approaches the cabin, he replies that it's no problem and assures the king he can rest easy, asking him to leave it to him. The protagonist thinks that isn't enough. They can't repeat the same mistakes they made when hunting the black cows. This time he needs to ensure everything goes off without a hitch. He calls Tarzan and tells him he has something for him to do, to retrieve the hide and bones of the herd leader, making sure the hide remains as intact as possible. Tarzan is confused by the request, but the protagonist hands him his powerful axe. Tarzan is terrified to see the king giving him his precious divine artifact. He leaves confidently, vowing to complete the task. Outside the cabin, Yu remarks that the protagonist needs to rest. He responds that he can't, and says he has something to discuss with her. Since there's no one else outside, she can come in. She understands and starts entering the cabin. He explains that he sent the others away because he has an important mission for her. Suddenly, she begins taking off her clothes and says she's ready. Annoyed, the protagonist yells that she misunderstood and tells her to put her clothes back on. Embarrassed, she does. He clarifies that he needs her help to perform a play of sorts. She is confused, wondering what kind of play this could be. He explains that he plans to send someone to negotiate with the Yalin clan, aiming to convince them to join the tribe and follow his orders. She mentions that the Yalin clan has more people than their tribe and questions why they would agree. Holding the monster's head, He intends to show them the tribe's strength and persuade them that joining is the right choice. He explains that there are 2 reasons he chose her for this task. First, the Yellen clan is led by women, so as a woman, she would be able to communicate better. Second, only she knows the truth about his condition. He reveals that the powerful attack left his body with catastrophic damage. Although the ointment prevented it from worsening, he still needs something more to heal properly. She reflects on the plan and asks if he wants to intimidate the Yellen clan with a bluff. She says she knows exactly what to do and asks him to leave the matter in her hands. The next day, Little One and Ah Yu were walking toward the Yellen clan, carrying a backpack. He mentioned that they were almost there, and even though the Yellen clan didn't like conflicts, they shouldn't provoke them at that moment. She understood and asked him to lead the way and leave the rest to her. Little One complained that the king was so unfair for making such a beautiful outfit just for her. Suddenly, they stepped into the bushes, and he said that the Yellen clan was just ahead. Looking down, they saw the Yellen clan enjoying themselves, bathing under a waterfall. Ah Yu remarked that Shun seemed strangely familiar with the place. He became embarrassed and pointed out a beautiful woman with green hair, saying she was the one they were looking for, the queen of the Yellen clan. Ah Yu was enchanted, commenting that she was very beautiful. Little One warned her not to be fooled by the queen's appearance, as he had heard that she had eaten many of her suitors. Ah Yu doubted it, saying it was impossible for such a beautiful woman to eat people. Little One insisted it was true. Suddenly, a few sentinels appeared behind them without warning and captured them. Later, the sentinels took them straight to the queen, reporting that they had caught the 2 sneaking around. They claimed the pair was some kind of waste and wanted to see her. The queen, holding her whip, observed them. Little One shouted that they weren't waste, but ambassadors, the title given by the king. Suddenly, something caught the queen's attention. She was indignant and commented that this was very rude, declaring that the woman would become a slave, the man would be thrown to the fish, and the piece of meat would serve as dinner for several days. Little One panicked at the queen's decision, and as one of the guards dragged him away, he screamed for Ah Yu to save him. Quickly, Ah Yu shouted that she had thought the queen of the Yellen clan was more perceptive, but was mistaken. The mountain of meat they planned to offer would now go to the Haiwam clan. The queen told the guard to wait a moment and let them finish talking. She stood up, walked toward Ah Yu, and questioned her about the mountain of meat. Ah Yu confirmed, saying it was from the herd of black cows that lived near the river to the north. The queen asked if they wanted to join forces with her clan to hunt the black cow herd. Ah Yu challenged the idea of joining forces, saying they shouldn't underestimate her clan, as the black cow herd was no match for them, and now the land by the river belonged to them. The 2 stared at each other, creating immense pressure. The people of the Yellen clan were in disbelief, claiming the woman was lying, as they had nearly been trampled by that herd before. The queen was taken aback and asked Ah Yu if she knew what happened to those who lied to her. Ah Yu replied that even the herd leader had been slain by the king, and if the queen didn't believe her, she could visit the tribe and see for herself. Suddenly, someone approached the queen and suggested that it might be a trap. Ah Yu questioned the idea of it being a trap and declared that the king was powerful and benevolent, capable of wiping out the entire Yellen clan if he wished. While one of the sentinels restrained him, Little One, desperate, shouted that she was right, but they weren't there to attack. They had only come to bring some gifts and an invitation from the king. He questioned why they still doubted them. Ah Yu affirmed it was true and added that if the queen didn't have the courage to come in person, she could send someone else to collect the meat. The queen, with an intimidating look and swinging her whip, warned that she'd better not be playing games. Later, Little One guided them to their tribe and mentioned that it was just ahead. When they arrived, he shouted, announcing their return. Annabelle, carrying a log, told him not to make such a fuss and to hurry up and help with the house construction, as the king was waiting by the riverbank. Little One understood. One of the sentinels approached the queen and asked what those houses were. The queen was confused, not knowing how to respond. Ah Yu led her to meet the king. Upon meeting him, Ah Yu announced that she had arrived and that the Yellen clan people were there. The queen, upon seeing the protagonist, grew uneasy, sensing a strong killing intent emanating from him and remarking that it felt like facing an ancient beast. With an intimidating gaze, the protagonist praised Ah Yu for doing a great job. Suddenly, the Yellen clan members were confused when they heard a noise coming from the nearby cabin. The muscular woman, after hitting Huang, covered his mouth to keep him quiet. Tarzan, who was also inside the cabin, explained that the king had ordered the wounded to hide there so they wouldn't be seen, and he asked Huang to be more careful. Huang replied that he was just curious to see what the queen of the Yellen clan looked like. The protagonist expressed his pleasure that the queen had accepted the invitation and come to his lands. Irritated, one of the sentinels demanded to know where the meat they mentioned was. The protagonist replied that it was around the cabin and they could take as much as they wanted, as long as they could find a way to carry it. They were astonished by the number of slain black cows. A group of them approached one of the black cow carcasses. Langu pointed out that theirs was the one nearby. One of the sentinels, wearing a mask, approached to cut off a piece of meat. When she tried to stab her bone knife into the cow's hide, the knife broke. The group of hunters nearby burst out laughing. Enraged, one of the sentinels demanded to know what was so funny and accused them of merely getting lucky, catching a few cows while they fought among themselves. The hunters grew irritated and challenged her, asking if she was trying to start a fight. Suddenly, the protagonist hurled his axe between the two groups, slicing the black cow's body in half. The sentinels were shocked by the king's power, and the queen was astonished. The sentinels wondered what kind of weapon that was, far superior to their ironwood clubs and bone knives. The protagonist told them to use his axe to cut some meat. The sentinels couldn't believe the damage the axe had caused. Langu remarked that they had provoked them first and asked why they should help. Irritated, the protagonist ordered him to do as he said. Reluctantly, Langu began cutting the meat for them, grumbling about their luck. The king assured the queen that he would make sure they carried the meat without trouble, as he always kept his word, since that was his principle. The queen commented that he was quite refined and asked how they managed to defeat the black cowherd. He replied that it depended on future developments, whether mutual understanding or personal experience. The protagonist concluded the conversation, telling the queen to take the meat and leave. The queen called him a stinky, cold-hearted man. As he watched her, the protagonist thought that his last throw had been a bit excessive just for show. If not for the leather bandages, his wounds would likely have started bleeding again. Suddenly, one of his wounds began to bleed. He noticed and became worried. Ayu quickly drew the queen's attention and mentioned that they had some extra stone axes they could give to the Yilin clan. She explained that while they couldn't compare to the king's divine axe, they were still strong enough to cut through the black cowhides and slice the meat. The queen refused, saying she didn't need such crude weapons, as they weren't suitable for them. As she left, she remarked that they too had powerful weapons they hadn't shown, and hoped they wouldn't have to point them at them someday. The queen ordered the sentinels to take what they could and prepare to leave. Ayu told them that if it wasn't enough, they could come back for more, but the sooner the better, as other clans had also received a share. As the Yelin clan departed, Ayu waved and said they were always welcome there. A bit away from the protagonist's camp, as the Yelin clan made their way home, the queen asked how the investigation went. Suddenly, an elite group appeared and reported to the queen that they had discovered that the tribe was building something called a house. However, they mentioned that there could be wild boars inside one of them, as they had heard grunting noises. The queen was confused, wondering if they had really built such a good dwelling for the boars. One of the elite sentinels remarked that the most incredible thing was that they had mastered the power of the fire god. Another sentinel claimed that was impossible. The elite sentinel insisted that they had seen them create fire out of nowhere to roast meat. The queen was incredulous. The elite sentinel hesitated, but the queen ordered her to stop stalling and speak. She reported that there were more than 10 people in total, including some children and an old man. She suspected that they had temporarily hidden the rest of the population. The queen questioned why they didn't search more carefully. The elite sentinel explained that since the nearest trees had been cut down, they couldn't get any closer without being seen, so they had to stay hidden in the forest and observe from a distance. The queen, furious with the information, walked past the elite sentinels. Suddenly, she took out her thorned whip and struck the group, warning them that if they dared to make excuses again, they wouldn't just get one lashing. The elite group bowed and thanked the queen for not expelling them. Later, in the protagonist's cabin, he complained about the pain as Ayu approached and commented on his wound. He replied that it was fine now, as the leather bandages had strong regenerative properties and should gradually heal his injuries. The protagonist noticed her hidden talent, eloquence. Ayu was relieved to know that the king was all right. However, the protagonist thought that the talent of eloquence was quite rare. She remarked that, compared to the queen of the Yelin clan, the king must prefer her. Embarrassed, the protagonist shouted that it wasn't like that at all and told her to be quiet, as someone might be listening outside. He instructed her to let the men who were hiding come out and then stop the bleeding, asking her to help with the treatment. He said he would leave the task of cleaning the bloodstains to her and asked Tarzan to stand guard at the entrance and not let anyone approach. She understood, and staring at the king, commented that he looked so cool at that moment, winking at him, making him quickly embarrassed. As they exited the cabin, the protagonist asked Little One how the mission went. He replied that he was back and marveled at how incredible the king was, saying that the Yellen clan had set up observation posts around the camp, just as the king had suspected. The protagonist inquired about the other task. Little One recalled that, while observing the Yellen clan sentinels from the trees, he did exactly as the king instructed and reported that they saw only what they were meant to see and missed what they weren't supposed to. The protagonist was relieved and told Little One he had worked hard these past days. Little One replied that it wasn't difficult and said he would now go help Annabelle and the others build the houses. Little One began hopping around joyfully. Ah Yu, seeing the others working hard, asked the king if the Yellen clan would really join them voluntarily. He replied that it was still too early to say, as the plan was only halfway done, and when they returned next time, they would proceed with the second half of the plan. Later, lying inside the cabin and looking at a system window, the protagonist commented on how tired he was. The main mission? Settlement. Objective: help build a home for the primitive people, establish a tribe and expand the population to 50. Time remaining, 11 days. The protagonist was shocked at how little time was left. He remarked that he didn't even have time to recover from his injuries. He decided to open his inventory. Basic language proficiency, basic survival booklet, basic recipes, universal map, small bag of salt, and a bit of hemostatic ointment, with only one use left. The system alerted that the mountain-splitting axe had been upgraded to the Pangu axe. New details available. Looking at the axe, he couldn't understand what was happening, and wondered when his mountain-splitting axe had become the Pangu axe. He wonders if the axe truly became a divine artifact, and how he overlooked that when he handed it over to Tung earlier. So he decides to summon the axe. Upon examining it, the system alerts: legendary weapon Pangu axe, attribute Earth, activation condition blood sacrifice, hidden ability. After releasing the power to create the world, it will drain the user's vitality to deal more damage, with destructive power relative to the user's remaining energy. He is confused, questioning if the blood sacrifice was what happened when he got injured during the battle. From the description, it seems that using the world-creating power must be perfectly timed, not too early or too late. Otherwise, it wouldn't just result in a scar on his arm. The protagonist sighs, holding his axe. He remarks that he didn't expect the weapon to evolve. He wonders if any other weapons also have hidden abilities or similar attributes. He comments that the activation conditions must differ for each weapon and decides to leave that to fate. And with just this axe, he almost got himself killed, so he decides to check the other items. He mentions that the only thing that could really be useful is the hemostatic ointment, and unfortunately, he only has enough for one use, so he decides to save it for a critical moment. Otherwise, he could definitely swing his axe around and hunt down all the nearby creatures, and no one would dare challenge him. He begins to reflect on the amount of meat the Yellen clan took, noting that it should last them for 2 days. Time is limited, and the only option left is to trust Little One for now. Suddenly, he calls for Tarzan, who is standing guard outside his cabin, and asks him to bring Little One, as he has a mission for him. Tarzan understands, and quickly brings Little One. Shun presents himself at the king's cabin. The protagonist asks if he remembers the rest of the black cow herd they chased away, and tells him he has 2 days to find the herd and report back as soon as possible. Little One replies that he'll go right away, and dashes off like the Flash. The protagonist notes that everyone has been working hard lately, and decides to prepare a small gift for everyone over the next 2 days. A few days later, the protagonist is inside his cabin, creating something, and decides to open the system window. He sees that only 9 days remain to complete the main mission and wonders if today should be the day Little One returns. Suddenly, a system window appears announcing he created a stone spearhead, gaining 1 technology point. He created a bone whistle, gaining 1 technology point. He created a horn canteen, gaining 1 technology point. He decides to give the whistle to Annabelle, as it would be more convenient for commanding during battle or hunts. The stone spearheads could increase the damage wooden spears deal, significantly raising their chances of victory if they end up in conflict with the Yellen clan. The horn canteen he plans to give to Little One, certain he will like it. Suddenly, someone calls out to him. Ah Yu, excited, enters the cabin and announces that the houses are finished. The protagonist is surprised by something and asks her to calm down, saying they should go take a look. She asks him to put on his coat first, since he hasn't been feeling well. He thanks her for the reminder. Enchanted by the king, she insists on helping him, saying he's worked so hard and should leave these small tasks to her. The protagonist thanks her. As they step out of the cabin, he asks her to join him in looking at the results. Suddenly, someone shouts that the king is here, Annabelle is shocked and happy to see the king and says these are the houses they built according to his instructions, asking him to take a look. Seeing the house, Annabelle asks if it isn't awesome. Frustrated, the protagonist says it looks good. Annabelle starts celebrating, thrilled that they now have houses. Lang exclaims that they're done living in caves or gathering branches. Huang suggests leaving the barn for the wild boars, as they finally have a place to live. Another hunter agrees. The protagonist says that's not what they said back then, and one of the hunters, holding a straw door, mentions he's going to place it on the cabin to close it up. After he attaches it, a system window appears, stating he successfully built a wooden house, earning 10 technology points. Physique, 2. Strength, 3. Agility, 2. Prestige, 0. Technology, 27. Territory, none. He is surprised to see that building a house grants the same amount of points as making fire. Reflecting on it, he realizes that the tribe has changed a lot since he arrived. Back then, they were like wild animals, drinking blood and living off hides. Now the changes in their behavior and intelligence are becoming more apparent, and he wonders if all these changes are caused by the system, accelerating some kind of evolution. He tells Ah Yu to let him know as soon as Little One returns. She agrees. He calls her back to the cabin and mentions that they need to keep building houses, as more people will be joining them soon. Suddenly someone calls out saying they found them. Little One had returned, celebrating that he found the herd. The protagonist congratulates Little One, who is a bit out of breath. Placing a hand on his shoulder, the king comments that they can finally proceed with the second part of the plan, and that there's no time to waste, asking everyone to follow. Little One agrees. He calls for Annabelle and mentions he needs to speak with him. After the protagonist sits on the ground with Little One and Annabelle, he explains the plan and asks if they have any questions. Annabelle asks if it will work, and if it isn't too risky. Little One, confident, tells him to relax, saying he can handle it, and that when the time comes, Annabelle has to ensure the others cooperate with him. The protagonist hands Annabelle the whistle, mentioning he can use it to give commands. Annabelle smiles and thanks him. The king mentions that he prepared a gift for Little One too, but will only give it to him after the mission. Annabelle tries out the whistle, while Little One thanks the king, calling him awesome. The protagonist reminds them to act immediately according to the plan as soon as they get the signal. Later, a group of hunters waves and bids farewell to the king, who reflects on how scarce labor is, and that now they have no choice but to assign tasks to the injured as well. He asks Ah Yu to inform the muscular woman and Huang to build a larger bonfire in front of the wooden house, but not to light it yet. She asks if it's for the arriving guests. He confirms, thinking that now all they can do is wait and see if the bait they set 2 days ago will attract a big fish. Later, Shou sees a large group emerging from the forest and approaching the camp. He is confused by the sight of so many people, wondering if they're from the Yellen clan. Suddenly he realizes something and starts running desperately, dropping the fruits he's carrying, and shouts for the king, announcing that the Yellen clan is here. Inside the cabin, while tending to the protagonist's wound, Ah Yu mentions that the injuries have healed, but that he should still take it easy for a few more days. He thinks it feels great to be taken care of like that, and that once he dominates the Yellen clan, he might get more attention from Ah Yu and the queen. Suddenly, he hears someone shouting that the Yellen clan has arrived. He comments that they've finally caught a fish and asks to bring them to see him. Later, Ah Yu is delighted to see the queen again and remarks that she looks even more beautiful than last time, saying the king is waiting for her in the palace and asking her to come in. The queen is confused, wondering what she means by palace. She recalls that the last time it was just a straw shed and questions how it's now a wooden house and how they managed to do that. She asks if the king is too scared to come out and see her, adding that they don't want to bother them in the future but will take more meat this time, as her subordinates are also eager to meet their new neighbors. That's why she brought a few more people this time, hoping she hadn't scared them. Ah Yu remarks that the king had already ordered 40 portions of meat prepared in advance, and they could take them directly. Awkwardly, Ah Yu also mentions that they hadn't brought 40 people. The queen asks if she is too worried about the Yellen clan and invites her to join them. Ah Yu responds that she's been captivated by the king's power for a long time and thanks her for the invitation. She adds that the meat is right over there, and if they couldn't take it all, they are welcome to eat as much as they want there, as per the king's suggestion. And if they have any trouble cutting the meat, they could ask for help from the camp's hunters. The queen replies that it won't be necessary and calls over one of the sentinels. Ah Yu then invites the queen to enter. Once inside the cabin, the king welcomes her to his humble abode. Embarrassed, the queen starts shaking her head, saying that this palace is quite elegant and rather decent. The protagonist, thinking, realizes she is quite interested in the houses and decides to keep charming her. He mentions that this is just a temporary makeshift home, and once they build the real palace, this place will be for the tribe. The queen, holding her whip, questions if he really intends to let the tribe live in a place like this. He replies that although it's a bit crude, they will provide better stone houses later. Suddenly, the queen uses her whip and attacks the protagonist by surprise, immobilizing him. He asks what she's doing, and with one foot on him and a bone knife in hand, she declares that no one knows men better than she does. Pressing the knife to his face, she says she has many ways to make him fall for her, and adds that offering her strange things willingly isn't enough to bring her down. The protagonist feels uncomfortable and thinks this is really bad, as it's quite thrilling. He asks if she really thinks she can force him to submit this way, and wonders if she believes he doesn't have a backup plan. In his mind, he realizes he's in trouble, with no backup plan at all, the situation spiraling out of control, and his injuries still not healed, making a direct fight even harder. Suddenly, Yu opens the door, announcing that everything is ready and they can start the festival. Seeing the scene, she comments that he shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. The queen then releases him. The protagonist remarks that they're done talking and that it's a great time for a barbecue. The queen starts glaring at Yu. He asks if she lit the bonfire. Yu confirms that she did. The queen thinks to herself that for him to withstand her coercion and remain so calm, he must either have a backup plan or simply not fear death. Compared to the men in her clan, he is quite different. Later, around the bonfire, the women of the Yelin clan call out to the queen, mentioning how good it smells, and grill the meat for her. The protagonist, holding his bag of salt, hands it to Yu and asks her to share it with everyone. She asks if that isn't the treasure that enhances flavor and thanks the king. Holding a small amount of salt, she tells the women to sprinkle some on the meat to improve the taste. They thank her. The queen becomes wary and asks what she is putting on the meat. Yu smiles and says she doesn't have to eat it if she's afraid. The queen sighs, seeing her clan members enjoying the taste. The protagonist, noticing that the queen is also trying the meat, thinks she should eat as much as she wants, as it buys more time for Little One and Annabelle to arrive. The queen is delighted by the flavor, commenting on how delicious it is. Meanwhile, in the forest, the group of hunters is hiding among the bushes, close to the black cow herd. One of the hunters asks if they don't have enough meat already and why they need to hunt again. Annabelle explains that they're not here to hunt, and tells him to just follow orders. Suddenly, smoke starts to rise, and the hunter remarks that it's the signal. Annabelle blows the whistle, and the hunters throw their spears, hitting the black cows squarely. The cows become furious and charge at them. Annabelle, desperate, says that the herd is advancing in their direction and that this is the best chance. They need to make sure to find the new herd leader. Little One, hiding in the trees, says that he doesn't need to worry. Suddenly, he spots the leader and shouts that he's found it. Leaping onto it with his spear and driving it into its back, he yells that he's got it and claims it as his. As the herd stampedes, destroying everything in their path, Little One clings to the leader, spear still embedded, shouting that he can't give up and that he has to do it, remembering how even the previous leader became prey. Gun, perched in a tree, spots the herd and shouts that they're veering east. Annabelle says he'll signal now and blows the whistle forcefully. Little One hears the signal and realizes he needs to turn right if the direction is wrong. Using his hidden riding ability, he begins to steer the herd leader toward the correct path, guiding it through the forest with the spears stuck in its back. Meanwhile, at the camp, the queen, still eating, thinks that overeating might make her gain weight, but the food is too delicious to resist. The protagonist watches her. Suddenly, he notices birds flying frantically from the forest and realizes it's time. One of the Yelin clan sentinels spots someone approaching the camp and tells the queen that one of the defenders left behind at the clan is here. The queen is confused by her presence. The desperate defender arrives, screaming that something terrible has happened. She trips and falls near the queen. With a wicked glare, the queen demands to know why all the fuss and asks what happened. Crying, the defender says that a herd of black cows has invaded the camp and caused destruction everywhere, and that the defenses were no match for them. The queen, outraged and in disbelief, orders everyone to return, vowing to make the herd pay. She remarks that she had always kept her distance from them and wonders what really happened, as it's a true disaster. Meanwhile, at the Yelin clan camp, some women have been defeated, while others try to escape the attack. One warrior shouts for everyone to climb the trees and use slingshots to defend themselves, ordering an attack, but they can't inflict much damage. She becomes frustrated, realizing that the slingshots can't penetrate the thick hide. Another warrior shouts to charge and save the wounded on the ground. They leap from the trees with bone knives, yelling to kill them for the queen. However, one of the cows delivers a powerful blow, knocking them down, and prepares to crush one of the warriors under its hooves. Just as it's about to strike, the other warriors scream in fear. Suddenly, the black cow stops. Using her whip, the queen manages to halt the attack. Everyone is relieved to see that the queen and the other warriors have returned. Holding the cow with her whip, the queen demands to know how it dares to hurt her people and challenges it to a fight. With her strength, she throws the massive cow to the ground. The cow, enraged, gets up and charges at the queen. She remarks that the beast is fast, and it lands a direct hit on her. The queen screams in pain, but before she falls to the ground, someone catches her. She groans, saying that hurt. The protagonist asks if she's all right. She replies that she's fine. He tells her to stay put and handle the rest. She mentions that these monsters came out of nowhere. The group of hunters tries to hide their guilt over the attack. She warns the protagonist to be careful. The protagonist, looking serious, draws the monster's attention and, facing the herd leader, asks if they've already forgotten the beating they took. The herd leader roars at him. The protagonist thinks that the leader isn't recognizing him and wonders if his cape made from the hide of their king isn't intimidating enough. However, the herd leader begins to back away. The protagonist sighs and thinks that the intimidation tactic is working. Pointing his axe, he comments that it's quite a coincidence to meet again. The herd leader is in shock. He questions if the herd has found a new leader and remarks that he looks much weaker than the previous one. The herd leader starts to tremble. The protagonist notes that since he's there, he might as well stay for good. With that, the hunters charge forward. Annabelle shouts for the little one to advance toward the herd leader. Using his hands for support, he throws the little one, who lands on the leader. Using his skill, Mount, the little one begins to ride on the leader, distracting the herd. The protagonist calls for the queen to leave, but she refuses, stating that the herd hasn't dispersed yet. She needs to fight more. He grabs her arm and tells her to stop. The queen asks him to let go. The protagonist comments that she can't handle the monsters alone and that she hasn't brought enough people. She would only be heading toward death. The queen is left speechless. He asks why she doesn't take her people to his camp. There, she can heal their wounds and wait for the right moment to reclaim the place. He promises he will arrange enough shelter and food and ensure their safety. The protagonist urges her to look at her people and remarks that they are not in any condition to fight. Ah Yu asks if she would rather watch her people be sacrificed in vain. The queen ponders, but then shouts for her clan, asking them to help the injured and retreat to the north. The Yellen clan begins to pull back, and a warrior shouts for them to follow, with the injured going first. The protagonist decides to leave the queen with Ah Yu, instructing her to take them back to the camp while he stays with the hunters to buy time. She understands and asks him to stay safe. Meanwhile, the hunters fight against the herd. Annabelle holds his spear, and a group of sentinels appears behind him, advancing toward the fight. One of them shouts for everyone to muster their courage and fight. Annabelle comments that they've defeated these monsters before, and that if anyone is scared, it would be better to retreat with the others. He sighs, seeing that they are not afraid. The protagonist notes that they are very brave and won't be left behind. Annabelle comprehends and leads the attack, shouting for everyone to attack. Later that day, as the sun sets, the group of injured arrives at the camp. Shosho, seeing that they have returned, asks where the king is. Ah Yu replies that he stayed behind with the hunters and mentions that there are injured people here, which is why they returned first, needing a place to rest. Shosho points to one of the houses, suggesting they can stay there. She thinks that if it weren't for the Musculosa and the others who worked hard despite being injured, they wouldn't have enough houses to shelter everyone. She asks those who are not injured to come with her to fetch water and food. The Yellen clan people thank her and say they will go with her. Ah Yu comments that for now, she will accommodate them in those houses and ensure food and safety, so they don't have to worry. After leaving the queen inside one of the houses, Ah Yu mentions she will help the others, and then the queen should rest. The queen, shaken, thanks her. After closing the door, Ah Yu sighs and thinks that in the end, everything went well. She remembers when the protagonist explained the plan earlier. He said the focus of the entire plan was to dominate the Yellen clan at the lowest cost. They couldn't allow more injuries after such a heavy battle. She feels excited, realizing that the entire plan was flawless and that there was just one final step left. The next day, Lang is on guard at the camp. The Musculosa asks if everything went well the previous night. He replies that it did, as he was on guard and nothing happened. One of the sentinels notices something as she sees a shadow approaching. She wonders why it suddenly became cloudy. It was the Musculosa wishing her good morning. The sentinel, startled, screams, asking what that was and what she wanted. The Musculosa says that the king called the queen to the palace because it seemed they had something important to discuss in person. The sentinel understands. Later, In the makeshift palace, the protagonist looks at a system window and realizes that there are only 8 days left until the end of the main mission. He comments that time is running out. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. Ah Yu opens it and announces that the queen of the Yellen clan is there. Upon entering, the queen comments that Ah Yu had already mentioned the merging of clans and that her answer is no. She states that he cannot force them just because the clan is temporarily weak. The protagonist replies that he is not forcing anyone, just proposing an agreement. He mentions that he can teach them to build houses, make weapons, and start fires, and in return, the Yellen clan needs to unite with his tribe, accept his leadership, and be under his protection. Leaning closer to the queen's face, he remarks that some things require more than just courage. She is more aware of the brutality of the Haiwan clan and the strength of the Jushi clan than he is. He comments that at that moment, she resembles a wounded deer, and soon the bloodthirsty beasts will follow the scent of blood to hunt her. The queen interrupts him and asks him to stop, saying she knows this, but it is not that simple, and she cannot make them accept the rules of a stranger unless... The protagonist questions her, asking her to say. She responds that unless he defeats her in a duel, that is the only way the Yellen clan will accept, and she asks if he has the courage to accept the challenge. The king, with a slight smile, agrees. The two exit the palace together. The queen gathers her people and discusses the challenge. The protagonist mentions that since the queen is injured and cannot participate in the duel, he will also not participate to ensure fairness. He chooses Annabelle to fight. Confident, he asks who will fight against him. Suddenly, one of the sentinels introduces herself, stating her name and that she accepts the challenge to fight him. He is surprised to see that she accepted and, underestimating her, tells her to be careful not to get hurt by him. Irritated, she warns him to be careful not to be pecked by her eagle. Suddenly, Annabelle charges at her, shouting that he is going to make stew with her eagle. She jumps back and throws her bone knife at him. Annabelle ignores it, thinking it is just a mere bone knife. However, he quickly realizes that the knife is heading toward the protagonist, and he cannot dodge it. He asks how she dares to throw a weapon at him. Using his axe, he manages to block the first thrown knife, but without realizing it, Ah Yin has already thrown a second knife, which hits his bone helmet, cracking it. Quickly, he jumps toward her and yells that if that is all she has, she should die. About to strike her with his axe, another sentinel who is watching the duel throws a knife, hitting him. He questions whether the duel is fair, as someone from outside attacked him. With that, Ah Yin takes the opportunity and charges at the protagonist. Just as she is about to hit him, Ah Gun, who was on top of the palace, throws his spear, piercing her body. The king and the queen become serious. Ah Yin falls to the ground. The other sentinels quickly gather around her and begin to protect her. One of them questions how the protagonist can play so dirty, claiming that bringing them all there was a huge conspiracy. The two clans start to face off, creating immense tension. One of the sentinels shouts for the queen to give the order, as they are going to kill all of them. Lang steps in front of Shosho and Ah Yu to protect them. Suddenly, Ah Yu looks at the protagonist. The king, looking at Ah Yin on the ground, thinks that he was not prepared for a murder during the plan, and wonders if they were trying to provoke them into a battle. He questions whether this was an order from the queen or something that happened without her knowing. If it was the queen, he could control the situation, taking her hostage. Suddenly, the queen shouts for them all to stop, and questions whether this little plot would fool her. She says she would never tolerate such despicable threats against friends who helped them, and mentions that she does not want to investigate everyone involved in this assassination plot, but that the duel is over. The sentinels question whether they have lost. The queen comments that Ah Yin is the most loyal and courageous warrior of the Yellen clan, saying that if it weren't for her, Ah Yin would never have abandoned her dignity and pride to do something like this. She acknowledges that she knows the protagonist has impressive skills capable of performing miracles and kneels before him, stating that if he could be benevolent enough to spare Ah Yin, the Yellen clan would be eternally grateful. He thinks that fortunately, it was not the worst outcome, and the initiative to control the situation is back in his hands. He reflects that the hemostatic ointment is almost finished. Extending his hand to the queen, he comments that he will not let her die, as they are all allies now. The queen thanks him. A masked sentinel urges him to hurry, as Ah Yin is getting weaker. Looking at her, he thinks he will ignore the assassination attempt for the greater good, but there still has to be a punishment. After invoking the ointment, he decides that there is no need to heal her completely, so he applies just enough to keep her alive, leaving the rest of the ointment for treating his own wounds. He applies the ointment to her injury and instructs them to take her to rest, assuring them that she will be fine in a few days. The queen and the sentinels cannot believe the speed of the healing. One of them, astonished, comments that it is simply a miracle. They all begin to revere the protagonist, shouting that it is a miracle. Suddenly, the king places his hand on the queen's shoulder and asks if her people can join his tribe now. The queen, bashful, replies that yes. He starts laughing and remarks that this is great. Holding her waist, he says she can continue to lead her people as long as they obey his orders. The queen states that she has one final request. He is surprised by the request. She mentions that he should become her partner and that they will have a grand ceremony to confirm their relationship. The protagonist feels excited and wonders if this is a gift falling from the sky. He imagines marrying her, exchanging rings, entering the bridal chamber, having a daughter, watching her grow, seeing her marry, growing old together and then departing for the afterlife together. He feels confused imagining this future and comments that the ending is both so sad yet so beautiful. The queen notices he is different and asks if something is wrong, questioning if he does not want the partner ceremony. The protagonist hugs her and assures her that he certainly wants it. But first, she needs to rest and recover from her injuries, and he will need time to prepare for the ceremony anyway. The queen understands. The king asks everyone to withdraw, and the injured should return and recover. He invites them to the ceremony in a few days. Everyone is confused by the situation. Suddenly, a system window appears, stating that he has established the tribe and must choose a name. Attributes: name, Chen Li, physical 2, strength 3, agility 2, prestige 0, technology 27, population 46, cultural evolution, Stone Age civilization level 0, territory, unnamed, approximately 1 square kilometer. The protagonist is surprised to see that the population is only 46 and questions why there are 4 less. He thinks that now it doesn't matter. He decides to name the territory first. The queen looks confused at his demeanor. A system window appears stating, successfully named. He has become the chief of the fledgling tribe and needs to increase the population and complete the main mission, settlement. He thinks he will have to find a way to deal with the Haiwan clan as his wounds are almost healed. Perhaps he should advance alone and capture some members of the Haiwan clan as prisoners. He feels frustrated, as he does not know if the capture will count as population. Ah Yu calls the queen and comments that sometimes the king behaves this way, and soon she will get used to it. The queen understands. Suddenly, the protagonist begins to hear the women whispering about him. One of them comments that when he is happy, he seems to have gone mad. Another woman says that this disheveled appearance suits him better. After all, he should be like the other men who became the queen's partners and were cut to pieces by her during the ceremony. The protagonist freezes and imagines the queen cutting him and devouring him piece by piece. He becomes desperate, questioning if the queen would eat him and wondering if that was the reason there were so few men in the clan. Suddenly, a huge shadow approaches him and calls out. He panics, thinking he is about to be devoured, but it's the musculosa. He asks if she is all right. She questions if he really intends to become the partner of that rude woman. He replies that he might need to reconsider the proposal. She becomes furious and remarks that she heard they would hold a ceremony with her. Imagining the queen devouring him, the protagonist admits that honestly, it was a bit hasty to agree to that. The musculosa asks if he is telling the truth. He comments that he thought he was getting a bride, but it turns out she is a mantis. As the musculosa lifts him up in celebration, he remarks that life is indeed unpredictable. Suddenly, Ah Yu approaches and calls for her, questioning why she sneaked off and reminding her that she said the injured should rest. The musculosa says she wanted to stay with the king. The protagonist states that he wants to be alone and asks Ah Yu to let the others participate in the camp construction if they want. Pulling the musculosa, Ah Yu comments that she will inform them right away. The musculosa insists that the king should think carefully and consider her position. Ah Yu, furious, interrupts and asks if she isn't afraid of accidentally crushing the king, urging her to come back quickly since there is a lot to do. The protagonist mentions that he needs to talk to the queen about the separation. The next day, as dawn breaks, the protagonist leaves the palace and is surprised to see the musculosa and the women of the Yelin clan helping with the construction. Looking at the map, he comments that everyone is getting along well and that the Yelin clan members have already started assisting with the building of houses. He thinks that today he should talk to the queen about the separation. He passes through the agricultural area of the Yelin clan's temporary residence while they greet him. He tells them not to mind him and to just continue what they are doing. One of the women calls out to him, asking if he is there to see the queen, mentioning that she is at the river to the north and offering to take him there. As they approach the river, the woman comments that she is just ahead. One of the maids who is helping the queen with her bath informs her that the king is there. The queen asks for everyone to leave. As they pass the king, they greet him. The queen is surprised to see the king there and asks if something urgent has happened. He replies that no, he just came to check how her injuries were healing. She mentions that her injuries are nothing serious and that she should be completely fine in 2 or 3 days. With a teasing look, she asks if he would like her to come out to see with her own eyes, or if he wanted to try her out in advance. The protagonist, feeling awkward, responds that it's not necessary, and comments that he hasn't even asked her name yet. The queen questions if that is the reason he is there. He tries to play it off, and she begins to laugh, telling him he can call her Xiao Hai, the name given by the former queen. The protagonist is confused, questioning her name and the former queen. She explains that it was the former queen who gave her that name, but since she was exiled, no one has called her that since. He feels anxious, thinking that the only options are to be eaten or to be exiled, and that she could rename her clan to Mantis Clan. He asks if the former queen had a partner too, and inquires about their whereabouts. She answers that they were all eaten because it is a tradition in the clan for the queen to eat her partners, which grants her more power. He becomes desperate, pondering how such frightening words are coming from such a beautiful face. She states that it is tradition. Among the ancient queens, she has no intention of continuing this practice, as it is very ungracious. The protagonist questions whether she has never eaten anyone. She replies that she only became queen recently and has never had a partner, so naturally, she hasn't had the chance to eat anyone. He sighs. Waving, he tells her to rest and eat very well because he is going to prepare for the ceremony. As he departs, he thinks that since he doesn't have to worry about being eaten, he needs to find a good time to talk to the musculosa about it. However, the queen calls him back and comments that even if she doesn't eat people, if someone deceives him in the future, she won't hesitate to cut something off. He is shocked at the thought of someone slicing a carrot and starts to contemplate the queen's words. The woman next to her remarks that today's dish is especially easy to cut. Later, in front of the palace, he looks at the system and notes that for now, he just needs to take some prisoners and complete the main mission. Annabelle, passing by him, greets him. The king takes the opportunity to call him over, saying that he will be leaving for a while and that during that time, Annabelle will be in charge of organizing everyone's work. If there is any emergency, he should send someone to find him at the beach to the south. Annabelle understands and assures him he will take care of it. Later, at the southern sea beach, someone wonders what has happened there upon seeing the bodies of the Haiwan clan. Hidden in a tree, the protagonist questions if they were exterminated. With his spear, he decides to move closer. Meanwhile, one of the Dodu, perched atop a member of the Haiwan clan, tells the other Dodu that he was the one who defeated them. As he approaches, the protagonist drives them away, commenting that the Dodu have been wandering around, so he thinks it should be safe for now. Checking the bodies, he notices they still have elasticity, don't smell bad, and whatever the reason for the fight they were involved in, it must have happened recently. The claws on their fingers were extremely sharp, and the wounds appeared consistent with those claws. He wonders if these lunatics were having internal fights. He thinks it would be better if he could find some survivors. Walking along the beach, he notices something. Spotting a body, he questions whether it has any visible wounds. The agonized and contorted expression suggests a slow and painful death. Looking at the man's hand, he comments that it looks like it was tangled and wonders if he choked. He questions how the Haiwan clan, accustomed to the water, met their end in the sea. The protagonist keeps wondering what happened there when suddenly someone calls him, saying there's trouble. The king asks the little one what happened. He responds that a group of crazed Haiwan clan members is breaking everything in the camp. The protagonist can't believe it. The little one comments that Annabelle sent him to call for help, and he needs to return immediately. The king quickly heads toward the camp, saying he's on his way. Meanwhile, in the camp, the hunters are trying to defend the area, shouting for everyone to stay together and be careful. Annabelle shouts to conserve their strength and prepare for close combat, as these lunatics are completely ignoring the wooden spears. Agun, up in a tree, wonders what is wrong with them, saying it's as if they feel no pain at all. The group from the Haiwan clan advances toward the hunters. Annabelle shouts for everyone not to panic, and that no matter what happens, they must not let them take them to the river, as they would have no chance against them in the water. Infuriated, the Haiwan clan charges forward. Annabelle shouts for everyone to be cautious of the attack. The two groups clash. Annabelle realizes the attack has been interrupted and shouts that this is the perfect opportunity. Huang, with his spear, yells to push them back. Annabelle shouts that the queen's reinforcements have arrived. The queen asks what is happening there. She is surprised to see the Haiwan clan and questions if they aren't supposed to live on the southern beaches, wondering how they appeared there suddenly, and noticing they seem a bit strange. Annabelle replies that he doesn't know, but they have been acting like lunatics, and suddenly came out of the southern river, starting to attack them. He comments that it is more appropriate to consider them monsters. The Haiwan clan becomes enraged. The hunters shout for everyone to be careful as they are coming. Furious, the Haiwan clan charges. Annabelle, along with the sentinels, urges them to advance and send those bastards to hell. A fierce battle begins between the two groups. Annabelle remarks that he will turn them into minced meat. The queen, with her whip wrapped around one of their necks, questions whether he can speak while she chokes him, but realizes that something is wrong. They don't seem to communicate at all. She screams, cursing, and asks what they are doing when suddenly one of them appears behind her, about to strike her with a powerful blow. The protagonist emerges with his axe, blocking the attack and creating a massive impact, questioning how he dares to try to hurt his woman. She feels relieved to see him there. Struggling to withstand the attack, he tells the queen to move away. She understands, and with that, the protagonist manages to repel the attack. He sighs, staring at the creature. He thinks that the creature resisted his blow with full force, equivalent to a strength value of 3. Suddenly, 2 creatures attack him from behind. The queen shouts to warn him. He is shocked, but Tarzan manages to take one down, and Agun hits the other creature in the chest with a spear. They comment that if the creatures want to fight the king, they must first get through them. The protagonist thanks them, saying they did well. He mentions that he will leave those little ones with them, and asks the queen if he can trust her to help deal with the rest, as he needs to focus entirely on the opponent in front of him. The two begin to face off, and the protagonist thinks that until the outcome of this fight is determined, he will be counting on their help. He remarks that he doesn't know what happened to the Haiwan clan and, pointing his axe, states that this has nothing to do with them, questioning if they have confused the target of their vengeance. The giant creature ignores him and charges at him. The protagonist wonders if they have lost the ability to communicate, and at the last second, manages to dodge the attack. However, the enraged creature lunges at him again. The protagonist is impressed by the explosive power and quick reflexes, all combined with sharp claws and teeth. Even with his strength and agility exceeding those of an ordinary person multiple times over, he is still just a weakling who barely causes damage against these monsters. And since he is in their territory, surrounded by their people, he cannot use the hidden ability of his axe. Moreover, he doesn't want to use that ability unless absolutely necessary. The creature charges at him with its claws. The protagonist uses his arm to defend himself, and the creature bites him. The king becomes furious and shouts for it to let go of him. Attempting to strike with his axe, the creature easily dodges, tearing a piece from his coat. The protagonist steps back and comments that if it weren't for the protection of the former herd leader's coat, his left hand would have been torn off by those sharp teeth. The creature begins to lick the piece of coat stained with the king's blood, and with that, its eyes change color, as if some kind of infection is taking hold. It starts to become even stronger, and with a tremendous roar, charges at the protagonist with incredible speed. The king realizes it is moving even faster, and at the last second, he manages to dodge. However, the creature manages to grab the coat and starts to shred it with its teeth. The protagonist watches, wondering how it became so fast all of a sudden. If he hadn't let go of the coat, he would be in its place, being chewed up. He notices that the creature has stopped attacking and wonders why, questioning what it is doing. The Haiwan clan begins to return to the water. The protagonist wonders if they are leaving and realizes something is wrong, as it only tore off the part of the coat that was stained with his blood. Then, he begins to analyze the battle. As he looks at one of his hunters who has no injuries, he notices that only one creature is attacking him. Meanwhile, another hunter, who has several injuries, is being attacked by a group at the same time. He wonders if it could be because of the smell of blood and comments that he finally understands. They use the scent of the prey's blood to lock onto a target, and that scent makes them even more bloodthirsty and crazed. In this strange state, they are acting based on their primitive instincts, just like sharks go wild at the smell of blood. The protagonist picks up a piece of mud and applies it to the wound on his arm, thinking that as long as they can use this trait, the little one finally arrives at the camp and asks the king if there is anything he can do to help. The protagonist asks him to grab 2 people and 3 piglets from the stable. The little one is surprised to see that it's for the wild boar piglets and questions whether they shouldn't be raised to become food later. The protagonist tells him to just do as he said. The little one understands. The king thinks that the Haiwan clan is forcing him to sacrifice 3 precious wild boar piglets, and he will collect that debt later. The protagonist approaches the queen and asks her to take all the injured off the battlefield and move them as far away as possible. While holding a creature with her whip, she understands. Suddenly, the little one and 2 women from the Yellen clan arrive with the 3 piglets and say to let the piglets run toward the riverbank. The little one scares the wild boar piglets. The king calls to Agu, who is up in a tree. He responds that he will take care of it and starts throwing spears, killing the 3 piglets. The Haiwan clan freezes around the small wild boars, and those in the water look toward the shore. Suddenly, they all charge the piglets and begin to devour them. The protagonist takes advantage of this opportunity and calls everyone, instructing them to apply the paralytic drug to the tips of their spears and to make sure to avoid vital points. Everyone understands. Agu notices something and comments to the king that they are acting strangely again. The king is surprised, but the Haiwan clan starts writhing in pain. The king is confused by this and questions if the little one poisoned the piglets. He replies that he didn't do anything of the sort. Suddenly, all the creatures fall to the ground. The protagonist tells everyone not to get too close and to stay alert. He wonders what is happening there.
If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and like the video. Thank you.